Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible. And we're getting into Leviticus, which means we're getting into some madness now. This is one of my favorite books because this is just so creepy fucking strange. This is where they pass a bunch of laws that make absolutely no sense and let you know that we're dealing with people from a realm of witchcraft. Anybody want to comment on that?
Sorcery is fun.
Barbarism and tribalism and everything primitive and horrible.
Lorence seems doubtful, but I'm sure I will point out, especially by the time we get to the 11th chapter.
Wait, about this thing? No. There's plenty of witchcraft and like magic in these books. Absolutely no. Like all the sacrifices and shit, like that's already magic. But the some of the textual notes here are kind of going to be interesting because the scholarship behind Leviticus and its place in time has been like debated a lot. Like to this day there is no like consensus on when these sections were written. For example, the Holiness Code, and that's in chapters, I think it's starting in chapter 17, and I forget the chapters that it
I think there is a section in I think 9 or 8 where at least Milgrom says that there is an addition by H.
Yeah. There's but again, like even with Milgrom's view and his huge study, there is still a debate around these things, and there has been since even even since Wellhausen, even when Wellhausen's it would have been the new documentary hypothesis because there was an older one, but it just wasn't as complete. So the holy shit.
Do not fight the snake.
Don't get in the face of the snake. Now, do you?
The Wellhausen documentary hypothesis is what I use to highlight my duct tape Bible. Obviously, there's so many current arguments. I'm going to run out of highlighter colors and it's just going to be a blur. But according to that, as Kip said last time, there's most scholars agree on the existence of a Deuteronomistic source and a priestly source. Deuteronomistic being the priest that raised the child King Josiah, who was righteous because he did what Daddy Priesty told him to. And the priestly source being the coming back from the exile and the writing of, basically codifying everything for the new world.
Yeah, like I said, this has been, especially in the last few decades, the most interesting parts of, I would say the more interesting parts of the Torah would be the narrative portions, right? And because that actually has like a story to it. It's not just like legalese all the time. And while there is a good chunk of non-legalistic material in Leviticus, its primary concern is of course legal matters. And the Holiness Code, which I believe it starts at Leviticus 17, and does it go to 20? What is it, chapter 20 something that it goes to? I forget where it ends, but the sections that one is usually seen, or has historically been seen as like an older section, and the chapters that we are getting into today seem to actually be an older section that takes from, or actually no, it seems to be the source material for I believe it was Exodus 29 and then later portions of Leviticus. And there is if anyone's interested in the history of the scholarship, at least a brief outline, there is a book from Christoph Nihan. It's called From Priestly Torah to Pentateuch, and he goes over a whole slew of arguments and how it's kind of changed over time, kind of the origins of these ideas to at least where they are now in some sense. And if I can just pull up what was it? If I can just pull up a quote from it, at least when it comes to more modern conceptions of this, which he does basically point out the entire debate. How a lot of scholars have recently been seeing not even recently, this is actually pretty old, but they have been seeing the difference between the narrative texts in P and the legal texts in P, and how that has changed how they date it. So here's a quote from the book. There is now almost unanimous acceptance that H, that being the Holiness Code, presupposes at least a first form of the priestly document, yet there's still significant disagreement as to the state of development reached by P at the time of the Holiness Code's composition, as well as to the precise nature of the relationship between these two works. The various scholarly positions on these two issues have major implications for the exegesis of the Holiness Code. Thus, scholars who maintain that H was originally composed as an independent code, which would be contemporary with or slightly later than the narrative portion, tend to regard it as an ideal constitution of sorts composed in the early Persian period for members of the Judean community returning from the Babylonian exile. To scholars who follow Ellinger, the purpose of the Holiness Code's composition was rather to supplement the priestly narrative with a legal code influenced by D, the Deuteronomist, but reinterpreted from a more distinctly priestly perspective. Although the likelihood of it, in my opinion, the likelihood of it being supplementary is it doesn't really fit.
I appreciate Lawrence's scholarship in discussing all these different sources and how he, or the priestly source, how they found so much in that. I can't really speak to that intelligently, but unintelligently, I can say that I remember from the 80s when they did all this drug testing that I was surprised at how much they could find in pee.
I'm going to continue to quote on that note.
Better than holy water at the Catholic Church, because they found many things in there.
Oh my.
Yeah,
Not good things. Things you do not want to put on your face.
Right, yeah.
All right, I'm going to read a couple of comments real quick. Shut up. Fat guy, bad ideas. That's interesting. $20, thank you very much. Says, I heard Aaron say a few months ago that it's been a while since he thought it was hot, since he thought he was hot. It's been a while since I thought the same, that he thought I was hot. But it's because I went blind in 2020. I'm sure he's still hot. Yes.
I feel the love.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Still hot. Okay. And then Minute Rice offers $6.66. Says, sending love for Amaru. That's the snake I just put back because he tried to eat the dog. And then, Aaron's there too, I guess.
So I would like to start my own spiel. This is only two parts. The first is regarding the name of the book. So in Hebrew, it's called Vayikra, which is the first word of the book, which means he called. But and the name Leviticus is a bit of a misleading title because it seems to indicate that this book is about the Levites. But this is not really true because I'll quote from Milgrom here. In Leviticus, the name of the third book of the Pentateuch, has nothing to do with the Levites. In Hellenistic times, the term Levites meant priests, and this is what the Septuagint and Vulgate title Leviticon, Leviticus, means. It is equivalent to the rabbinic title Torat Kohanim, the manual of the priests, and that of the Peshitta, Sipra de Kahana, the book of the priests. The Levites, however, are mentioned only in one small passage of Leviticus. That's in chapter 25, verses 32 to 34. Almost as an afterthought and in a non-cultic context. Thematically, the absence of the Levites makes sense. In Exodus, the priestly text describes the construction of the cultic implements, tabernacle and priestly vestments. In Leviticus, this static picture is converted into scenes from the living cult. Numbers follows with the cultic laws of the camp in motion. For example, the transport of the sancta and their protection against encroachment. Because these activities form the main function of the Levites, it is no accident that all of the cultic laws pertaining of the Levites are in Numbers, and none are in Leviticus.
I want to throw in that I included in the description here Tomer's bibliography for the things he would be referring to in this chapter.
Oh, wonderful.
I usually have at least 4 modern commentaries for my the books that I'm commenting on, Here, my main sources will be Bernard Jacob Bamberger's commentary on Leviticus from the Torah, a modern commentary that edited by Gunther Plaut, Baruch Levine's commentary from the JPS Torah commentary on Leviticus. This is a Hebrew source. Baruch Levine, Meir Paran, and Lorence H. Schiffman, the editors in Olam Ha-Tanakh Vayikra, which in Hebrew means the world of the Bible, Leviticus, and Jacob Milgrom's commentary on Leviticus, which is a very much in-depth analysis of Leviticus. I mean, the analysis from chapter 1 to 16 is like 1,000 pages long, and it's very meticulous in its analysis. So
I love you, Tomer, but I don't think we can read 1,000 pages on screen.
No, don't worry.
I love your commentary. I deeply love it. I'm going to try to continue to serve as a bridge between sort of the scholarly perspective and those who maybe haven't actually studied that, because it just, life happens, and it is what it is. The priestly source is what's referenced in this with the Levitical, Leviticus, obvious reference, Levites, the concept of it as a priestly source. This was written either in, or hypothetically, obviously, written either in or returning from the Exodus, the exile in Babylon. Basically, it's when Persians allowed all these conquered peoples to go back to their lands and become vassal states who would pay them, that they didn't have to micromanage. One of the things you had to do was have a written law code, because, that really only makes sense. Like, you can go be a people, but get your ducks in a row first. So the Jews did this. And they wove in such of their old texts as they had saved, and then wrote in a bunch of additional things. These would have been written or compiled by Ezra and Nehemiah, who built the Second Temple and oversaw the return to Jerusalem, or influenced by them. There's a lot of racism in that voice.
Yeah.
There's a lot of hatred of intermarriage with the idol worshiping peoples who always lived there, who you are actually more related to than anyone you lived in captivity with, but whatever.
The problem I have with Tomer's references is that, Tomer showed this thing that showed how I showed a link that in America, the United States, atheists know more about the Bible than believers do. And Tomer showed a link that outside of the United States, that Jews knew more about the Bible than Christians do.
Yeah.
Apparently, his was showing that anybody knows better than Christians outside of, or maybe Jews know everything better than whatever it was. I was only talking about the United States, within the U.S., right? So all of Tomer's references, they're all Jewish rabbis. They're all rabbis something or whatever.
Not all of them.
Yeah, well, I want to hear about the American perspective. What about the opinion of Amos Moses from the trailer park southeast of Thibodaux, Louisiana? I want to hear that.
That's for the Mormon show. That's for the Mormon show. That's because the magic place and the angel and the whatever. Merca.
Once we get to Ezra and Nehemiah, there's a crazy amount of racism there. But you mentioned that at least under the new documentary hypothesis, that would be the idea that they're the compilers. Interestingly, early on, it was actually thought that Ezekiel wrote at least part of Leviticus, and
Ezekiel was considered like a priest.
Concept, just based on
because
what is thought of his life.
Yeah, but there are a lot of similarities between, was it the Holiness Code or was it a different part of Leviticus that shares a lot of similarities to the book of Ezekiel? But no one really holds that opinion anymore.
The Holiness Code, is that where you make a pinky swear with your daughter that she'll save herself for you? And until marriage?
No, that's the, you can't have any kind of sex and you have to bathe after anything.
Any kind of sex?
Ritual.
It's all sodomy.
Well, and I'm going to quote a friend of mine from Arkansas when he got caught cheating on his wife out back of the trailer, and he said, "Head ain't sex, man."
Bill Clinton would like to meet this man.
Bill Clinton of that depends what your definition of is.
Maybe it's just an Arkansas thing.
No,
I think we
no.
should start reading.
Loophole.
Yeah, I'll say that.
The loophole. Garfunkel and Oates.
I
If
wanna-
you've taken a chastity pledge, you can apparently have anal sex if you're a Christian girl.
I
It
wanted
also doesn't
to,
count if you're a cousin.
to kind of piggyback on what Lawrence was saying, that a lot of this is going to be legal code and not narrative, so not fun reading. But even amongst the narratives that we've read so far, the only one that I think is partially maybe a good story as far as stories read is the Joseph story. The
Yeah.
other ones are just wackadoodle.
Yeah, because
You notice how my wife,
So-
my own wife, says she'll piggyback on what Lawrence says, not what I say. No, she wants to piggyback on the guy with credibility.
Hey, you
Listen-
both have a crush on Lawrence, and we can all see it. We're just all trying to bring you together.
Okay.
All right, so as an introduction to what we're going to actually read now, so Leviticus has a lot of different stuff in it, but the first bit, like the first few chapters, is very repetitive, detailed, gory stuff about bringing sacrifices, and it's going to get a bit confusing. So I wanted to kind of give a little overview. So more or less, we're going to read about 4 different types of sacrifices. There's one which is like completely burnt up.
Yeah, that's the Ola.
You can, the
Well
olah,
done.
which is brought. You kind of bring it yourself. You're not forced to bring it. It's like a voluntary sacrifice where you give everything to God. And then there's certain animals that you can use a bull, a goat, or a sheep for that. And then there is like another type of voluntary one, but you don't burn everything. And it's the same animals. And then there's 2 types of sin offerings. One is for
Chatat.
like, so there's chatat, which is a regular sin offering, which is like if you make a mistake. A sin
And
by
Asham, I
accident.
think.
Yes, Asham is
That's the
second
guilt
type.
offering.
That's it. So sin offering and guilt offering. So Asham is like the guilt offering is like more serious sins and stuff like that. And that
Like
one,
you knew it was wrong, but you
is-
did it anyway, kind of a thing.
stuff like that.
I
think
get
it-
into details when we'll get
yeah,
to
I'm
each
sure
of the
we will.
sacrifices. Yeah.
Yeah, and the only
Just got
difference
back from the
between
order
those
of
two
fay.
is-
What's the order of fay? Well, it's what you ought not to do, but you do anyway. Sorry.
For the smaller sins, the birds are like, "What did I do?" For the sacrifices, why do I have to die here?
Yeah,
The
exactly.
hell?
Yeah, so for the lesser sins, it'll be like a goat or a sheep, and for the more serious sin, it has to be a ram. There's also like meal offerings, which are
Mincha.
For the
sacri-
more serious
yeah.
sin, I'm just going to quote you out of context. For the more serious sin, it has to be a ram.
Yeah, at least. Don't even.
Yeah, because if you did it with a sheep, it would only be 1 sin, not 2.
It totally makes sense. I can see it.
Okay, I think my catchphrase for this chapter is going to be blood magic, everybody drink.
Yeah.
And so I got another comment. Truthful Serpent says, I'm always curious what Lawrence is vaping over there.
It's not.
LOL.
It's not a vape. It's a hookah.
Not a vape.
There are 2
Don't-
different things.
don't-
Both are lethal.
Don't
Will you show
bring
them
that
the
shit
apparatus so that
into
people
my
can?
house.
Can you
I
show
don't
them
even
the?
know what a hooker
They
is.
don't. They just see the bit that's in your hand. They
Right,
don't.
okay. So like
It's
here's
a
the hose,
piccolo.
right? Like it's kind of long. Like I'm not gonna. I mean, I could pick up the hookah, I guess, but here, hold on. It's gonna be kind of awkward here.
It goes to this whole genie bottle thing.
You got to rub it the right way.
Oh, you
It's
gotta
also
rub
popular
your
in
arms
Israel, so I
the
know
right
what
way.
this
Do you
is.
not have hookah bars in America?
No.
No,
we
we do
went to
not.
a hookah bar with Lawrence once before COVID.
Ooh, fancy.
That's true. That's true.
Ah.
We did. But the only other time I'd ever been in a hookah bar, we were at a Syrian restaurant in Dubai, and it was the only time I'd ever heard of a Syrian restaurant. And we're all smoking out of a hookah, sitting outside an outdoor cafe, counting Aventadors, because you can't count just Lamborghinis. There's too many. You can only count the Aventadors.
Oh, also, by the way, yes, there are hookah bars here. That's where I work. So the hookah bars
Nice.
That works out
aren't
well.
in the
Oh,
laundry.
sweet.
room, the one where I work.
Arn and me were and Lawrence they had Arab TV on the TV and we're like, I wonder what country it is. They were like because there was like a Lebanese flag. Like I've said it, I bet it's Lebanon because it had that cypress tree, you know, and it was.
Nice.
Yeah. I think when it comes to Arabic food, Lebanese seem to have a bit of a monopoly when it comes to restaurants. Don't know why.
See, a lot of Americans just get confused at that. When Lawrence pulls out that whole apparatus and everybody gets to see the whole thing, they just think he's the vacuum cleaner.
Oh,
Okay,
my old roommate had a hookah.
in
The
my-
water in
suggest
it.
that note.
did
In
not
my
do that.
limited experience, I had Lebanese teachers and Egyptian teachers and Saudi teachers, and the Lebanese are like the most laid back and chill. Probably would smoke a hookah with you, you know.
Yeah, they're more as a country. They're more what's the word? Not diverse, but like I mean they are more diverse.
But I like how
religious
Lawrence
thing.
showed the hardware to completely distract you from the type of opiates that he's smoking.
Yeah, it's just
Smoking
tobacco.
opiates.
It's tobacco.
Okay,
It's
I
even
think,
worse.
I'm sorry.
I think
I
we're
saw Aunt
diverging.
Chair's comment. I love you, Aunt Chair.
Oh yeah, a couple of comments and then let's read.
There's only one.
Oh,
Okay, Aunt
yeah.
Jer says, "Don't play drinking games with Lilith, or you'll end up giving a heave offering."
Yeah,
We must
Lovely.
pray to the porcelain god now.
yeah. We just got back from drinking beer with Matt because we were helping him get a snake, and I don't know how much more I can drink. So every
need-
time there's an offering, blood offering here, oh no.
Yeah, it's just weird that you
Yeah.
would say that because Matt needed help getting a snake. But just Alexander Fraser says, "Hey guys, wonder what your view is on the whole religious side of the UKR. As a Scottish citizen, we're described as peasants, and kings/queens are not permitted to follow land rules. Wait, kings and queens are not permitted to follow the rules."
what?
I feel like this is something about the British monarchy that most of us don't have the background to understand the references to, although Isaac may have.
I'm confused because whoever wrote this is from the UK. I'm guessing they speak English as a primary language. They invented the language, and yet I'm not understanding it, and it's the only language I speak.
What if
Yeah,
he's
someone-
typing with a Scottish accent?
Have more scotch?
Yeah, I don't really.
You just made my eyes look in different directions.
Yeah, it might be a Scottish thing about the land rules. I don't know what those are. And
I'm just wrestling with the
yeah.
quandary of how kings and queens are not permitted to follow the rules.
Because they already own all the land, maybe?
How are they not permitted to follow
Yeah, like
the rules?
permitted to not
Yeah, Alexander, try rewrite
is
that.
one thing, but not
For us
permitted
silly
to is a
people.
different thing. I know that the Royal House of Windsor has a house out in Scotland. The Queen would often go there for Christmas with her family and stuff like
I
that.
think she lives there most of
And
the time.
that's where
It's her favorite.
well, she's dead now.
Sandringham Castle.
But it was
Yeah.
her favorite, yes.
So
and
she
and
doesn't
that was
live there
where
most
one
of
of
the
my
time.
favorite
You
Queen
hear
Elizabeth
vodka.
stories, where she took the Saudi prince for a drive
Oh.
back when Saudi Arabia wouldn't let women drive, and she picked him up from the airport, and she drove in a Jeep across the Scottish Highlands, giving him lovely commentary all the way.
Isaac,
I was
Isaac,
like,
I'll
"Mwah."
channel
Yeah.
Alexander Fraser for you. You ignorant Sassanach.
Okay, so I
Yeah,
think we should
yeah.
begin reading.
At some point, we should probably read something.
Yes.
We've been reading comments. That's reading.
Yeah, but not the Bible.
Oh,
All right,
boy.
And you're all avoiding this.
Let's read a bit and then I'll reply afterwards about it.
Okay, who's reading?
Who wants to read?
Who?
I nominate Lilith. I'm Lalandra.
Alondra?
Yep.
Who's the most
start with an
hungry?
L2. All right, let's talk about barbecue.
You can actually
Yeah.
finish the chapter because it's 17 verses long. So
Okay, read the
Ooh.
whole chapter. Let's
As
see
a
if I
southerner.
can do it in a Texas accent because we're talking about charring some cattle. The
You hope.
burnt offering. The the Lord called unto Moses and spake unto him out of the tabernacle of the congregation, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, If any man of you bring an offering unto the Lord, ye shall bring your own offering of the cattle, even of the herd, and of the flock. If his offering be a burnt sacrifice of the herd, let him offer a male without blemish. He shall offer it of his own voluntary will at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation before the Lord. And he shall put his hand upon the head of the burnt offering, and it shall be accepted for him to make an atonement for him. And he shall kill the bullock before the Lord, and the priests, Aaron's son, shall bring the blood, and sprinkle the blood round about upon the altar that is by the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, just so you know. And he shall flay the burnt offering and cut it into pieces. And the sons of Aaron and the priests shall put fire upon the altar and lay the wood in order upon the fire. And the priest, Aaron's son, shall lay the parts, the head, and the fat in order upon the wood that is on the fire, which is upon the altar. But his inwards and his legs shall be washed in water. Okay? And
Blood magic! Everybody drink!
And the priest shall burn all on the altar to be a burnt sacrifice and offer made by fire, and of sweet savor unto the Lord. And if his offering be of the flocks, namely of the sheep or the goats, for a burnt sacrifice, he shall bring it a male without blemish, no females. And he shall kill it, none of those womans. And he shall kill it on the side of the altar northward before the Lord. And the priest, Aaron's son, shall sprinkle his blood round about upon the altar, and he shall cut into his pieces with his head and his fat. And the priest shall lay them in order on the wood that is on the fire, which is upon the altar. But he shall wash the innards and the legs with water, and the priest shall bring it all and burn it upon the altar. It is a burnt sacrifice, an offering made by fire of a sweet savor unto the Lord. And if the burnt sacrifice for his offering to the Lord be of fowls, so then he shall bring his offering of turtle doves or of young pigeons. They didn't have turkeys. Turkey is good barbecue. And the priest shall bring it onto the altar and bring off his head and burn it on the altar, and the blood thereof shall be wrung out at the side of the altar.
Blood magic! Everybody drink!
And he shall pluck away his crop with his feathers and cast it beside the altar on the east part by the places of the ashes, and he shall cleave it with the wings thereof. Pow, just like that. Pow, you know. But shall not divide it asunder. Oh, okay. Don't divide it asunder. Sorry about that. And the priest shall burn it upon the altar, upon the wood that is upon the fire. It is a burnt sacrifice, an offering made by fire of a sweet savor unto the Lord. Oh, yeah.
For those of you who couldn't recognize it, my wife was reading the Southern Trailer Park version of the Bible, in which it really does say "pow" just like that, you know.
Right. I just have to wonder, I get why God loves barbecue. I also love barbecue, but why is he so obsessed with eating only dick?
That's not what it says.
Only males.
Oh, about that. I'll get to that.
Oh, yeah,
actually.
about that.
There is a good explanation. There is a good explanation, but
that sounds like a good explanation too.
Okay, first about the verse 2, an offering. In Hebrew, it's korban, which is derived from the root kuf resh bet, to be brought near. Milgrom comments, this term is found exclusively in P and in Ezekiel 2:28 and 2:28, 40, 43, and is not limited to offerings for the altar, but applies to any sanctuary gift, such as draft animals and carts, as in Numbers 7:3, or spoils of wars, Numbers 31:50. The Septuagint renders correctly gift. Archaeological excavations have turned up objects inscribed with the word korban for presenting or preparing offerings.
I guess the word
In-
offering is a good translation.
Yes, sacrifices. Yeah, so. Verse 3: burnt offering in Hebrew olah, derived from the root ein lamed hey, to ascend. Levine comments, the offering may have been called olah because its flames and smoke, quote unquote, ascended to heaven. Other actions involved in presenting the olah may also help to explain its name. There was the ascent, quote unquote, of the sacrifice itself onto the altar, and one speaks of, quote unquote, raising up the olah conveyed by the hif'il form he'elah. There is also ascent, quote unquote, of the priest or of the officiant or the donor onto a raised platform where the offering was to be made. This interpretation seems to be corroborated by an ancient Ugaritic epic that tells of a king named Keret who mounted the turret of a city wall to offer a sacrifice. His act is conveyed by a form of the verb ali, ascend.
Thank you, King Carrot.
Now about the male. So according to Philo in the Special Laws Book 1 Section 200, the male is preferred because it is more complete and more dominant than the female. But Milgrom says
Classic Philo.
Yeah.
The male is
More
more
complete?
complete.
Yeah.
You're not complete unless you have a penis. What can I say?
Hey, you're
Milgrom,
not complete unless
At least
you have
Philo.
these titties.
How about
From
having
Philo's
an
perspective, it was like, no dick, not enough.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
you know, God loves dick.
Milgrom, however, notes that the
Except the
female.
Hmm.
Milgrom, however, notes that the female, being the one who gives milk and offspring, is more economically important than the male. Sorry.
True.
That makes some sense.
You have a lot of
ex-
females.
sorry.
Heard.
Yeah. Acceptable to the Lord. In Hebrew, lifnei Yehovah, before the Lord, as KJV and JPS render it. The Vulgate renders, to make the Lord favorable to him. Levine comments, Hebrew lifnei Yehovah seems to delineate a defined sacred area, at times the zone beginning at the rear of the altar of burnt offerings in the sanctuary courtyard and continuing to the interior of the tent. In other passages, the zone is less specific, referring to a large space near the entrance of the courtyard. The point is that priestly law strictly limits sacrifice to a particular area and to the legitimate altar. Verse 6, skin the burnt offering. Bamberger comments, the hide becomes the property of the officiating priest, according to 7:8. It is his only compensation for offering an olah. Of most other sacrifices, the priest receives at least a portion of the meat. Israelite priests were not usually paid for their services in money. In contrast, a Phoenician temple in Marseille had a regular schedule of tariffs posted, stating the fee in cash and in meat for each kind of animal. Those priests were, however, required to forego payment if the sacrificer was poor.
Well, that's good at least. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I was wondering if there were like what the parallels were between all of these rules, different types of sacrifices, the animals used, the putting the stuff in the right order, if there's parallels with other Near Eastern.
Yeah,
religions.
some have to be skinned, some don't. The feathers have to go east. All these, there's a lot of specificity. So yeah, I'm curious too as to whether that comes from somewhere or somebody just went, let's just do this and make people wonder.
Well, you need the blood for the blood magic. Also, you're not allowed to eat blood because it's sacred. So if you're doing the kind of offering where you're really just sacrificing a portion of it and the priest get most of it, you have to still take out the blood, but it's not as big a deal about giving the skin because the priest still gets steak for dinner, or chops,
That's
whatever.
why you got to
whatever.
wash the organs.
Right, exactly. Whereas obviously in the few occasions where they do like burn the entire animal to ash, which is definitely a thing, then obviously you're not going to be eating that.
Which I don't understand. I mean, because really, if you've done it well done, you've already ruined it.
Thank you.
The Lord has his preferences.
He certainly does.
Verse 8, the fat. In Hebrew, it's padel. Septuagint, Targum Onkelos, and Mishnah Tamid 4.2 read it suet, and this is also what the JPS translates to. The term is cognate with Akkadian pitul, which refers to the suet of the liver. Verses 10 to 13, Paran comments, the description of the burnt offering from the flock is briefly delivered, and certain details of it, which were given in the burnt offering from the herd, are missing. It seems that for the burnt offering from the flock, all the same details mentioned in the burnt offering from the herd were practiced, but Scripture shortened it and gave the procedure of the sacrifice while omitting some of the details. The exact location of the slaughter, however, is mentioned at the north side of the altar, a detail which wasn't mentioned in the burnt offering from the herd.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Verses 14 to 17. Milgrom notes that because the introduction deals only with sacrifices from quadrupeds, this section on fowls must have been added subsequently. Leviticus Rabbah 3.5 tells of the purpose of the burnt sacrifice, to allow poor worshippers to bring a burnt offering.
Yeah, that seems to be the consensus among everybody, that it's just a lot easier access. And then we get an even easier access one with the next chapter.
Yeah.
Which I'm ready to dive into as soon as
Too
Tomer has
bad
finished.
they don't have turkeys over there. That's better barbecue than doves.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Yeah.
about that.
That's the
Turkeys
new
are
world.
native. Yeah,
Yeah.
turkeys are from America, and actually, when they became popular in Europe, Jewish people were like, "Can we eat this? Is it kosher?" And when it comes to birds, when we get to chapter 11, we will talk about this in a bit. And it's more like we don't actually know which birds are kosher, so we just have a tradition. These ones we've always eaten, these ones we don't. And with turkey, they had to the rabbis had to make like a special proclamation saying turkey is okay. It's more like it's similar enough to chicken, and
But I think
partridge has a tradition.
I think
But there
it's a
are
good
some
thing
that don't eat it.
Sorry. I think that it's a good thing that the Bible doesn't mention turkey, because if it would have, then Mormonism would be true.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, it looks like the only Jews who could eat turkey were the ones who came across in the boat with the, the Lamanites and all that, and the Nephites, so that they could
Turkey.
start Mormonism.
Turkeys are just chickens blessed by Mormon. Moroni, whatever his name is.
Moroni. Okay, verse 14. A young pigeon.
What a name
In
for a
Hebrew
cult
Bible,
agent.
the Hebrew Bible literally reads sons of the pigeon, Bnei Hayonah. Paran comments, the phrase sons of the pigeon, Bnei Yonah, is special for the priestly law. Outside of it, the name Yonah appears over 20 times. This phrase is similar to phrases like sons of the cattle in Genesis 18:7 and 1 Samuel 14:32, or sons of the flock, Jeremiah 31:22 and Psalms 114:4. Phrases with the stem ben, son, are common in poetry and appear as synonyms for other missing synonyms, like the phrase ben em, son of mother, or ben av, son of father, as a nickname for brother, and son of bow, Ben Keshet, as a nickname for an arrow in Job 41:20, etc. The priestly law singled out this phrase for itself out of its tendency to adopt terms exclusive to it, due to the importance of its field of activity, which is the sacred. The uniqueness of the terms is aimed at distinguishing this field from the rest. Verse 15, wiring off the head. I hope I said it correctly. So,
Ringing?
Levine, wearing, is it?
Ringing.
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 Like-
ringing.
Yeah, it's like when you twist it in two different
It's
directions.
W-
W
R-
at the
okay.
beginning.
It's
Yeah,
Okay.
ringing.
Okay, so Levine comments, the Hebrew verb mem lamet kuf means to break the nape of the neck, usually of a bird. In later periods, this was done by the priest with his fingernail, according to Mishnah Zevachim 7, verses sections 5 to 6. In this case, the head of the bird was to be severed after its neck was broken. But in other instances, this was not done. When birds were used as sin offerings, the heads were not severed. So we are told in 5 verses 8 to 9. The reason for severing the head of a bird offering as an olah, i.e. burnt offering, may be that this parallels the procedure for executing other animals, as we read in verses 6 and 8.
Yeah, speaking of the verses of 6 and 8, so there is actually it would be through 3 through 6 and then 8 through 9. If you compare that to Leviticus 8, I think it's 18 through 21, there is a very, very strong parallel in how these sacrifices are done, but it's like in a ratted version, like a much shorter version. And what I mentioned before, that we have parts of Leviticus that are very obviously based on other parts of Leviticus. We can kind of date these, at least relatively, relative dating, and come to the conclusion that this part of Leviticus is earlier than that other part of Leviticus in chapter 8. And I think it was, I think I mentioned it as well. Exodus 29 also shares similarities to Leviticus 1 through 3. So we will see a lot of things that we've already kind of covered, but not fully. This would be like the source material for both of those sections.
My final comment on this chapter is about the feathers in verse 16. In Hebrew, it's notzata, with notza meaning feather. Paran comments, based on the context of this word, notza could be understood by its usual meaning feather, according to Nachmanides, since it's discussing a fowl, like in Ezekiel 17:7, great wings and full plumage, notza. Some, however, derive...
In Hebrew, the word nutsack means feather?
No,
Notza.
sa. Sorry. Okay, some, however, derive notza from the root yud tzadik aleph, to come out, and connect it with tse'ah, feces, the digested food that is found in the crop. Targum Onkelos translates its excrement, and Rashi interpreted together with its entrails.
Yeah, JPS translates it as the crop with its contents.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is the immortal, eternal creator of every galaxy, giving his timeless message for all mankind on exactly how you're supposed to kill your livestock to appease him
if you
somehow.
believe what the evangelicals say, yeah, but if you if you don't, then this was for a specific community.
Yeah, when it comes to
unfortunately, the evangelicals are the ones causing us all to lose our human rights. So if you're a Christian and you take offense to this, we'll be less offensive when they stop trying to take our human rights.
Wait, even if this is for a specific audience of people of how to kill your freaking bird, and it like verse 17 is cut the wings off, but don't chop it up. Okay, big deal.
Like
where it's
just
like tear
the
it
wings.
open by the wings without severing it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
tear
very
it
particular.
That
open
poor bird.
by its wings. At least
With
it's dead at this
I don't know,
point.
something like
The
that.
book isn't as bad as it could be, because it could say to take all the bones out before you kill it.
I'm not sure
Yeah,
how
that
that
would be
works.
really bad, though. That would be really bad.
Yeah, it seems
Oh,
like
we fucked up another one. We better start over.
Yeah, it seems like the whole preparation is done without a knife. So the whole thing. By the way, the thing about like cutting the bird's head, we're talking about a dove, right? It's a very small little bird. Cutting it off with a nail. Apparently, the priests would grow their thumbnail long so that they'd be able to use
For
it as a.
God's sake!
I know.
They had long thumbnails.
Ah, okay.
Well, it's not unusual. I mean, some guitarists have like long nails to play guitar, so.
They're
Yeah.
not
They're not
beheading
using it to
birds.
slaughter small birds.
Not to behead animals. They're to play music.
Yeah, they're for cutting
You
open
get
Amazon
laid.
packages.
We're talking like Dracula-like thumbnails, like this long.
I mean, the slaughter is supposed to be like very quick, so I'm guessing they had to like file them down, maybe.
I mean, I'm all for a quick kill if you're killing an animal, but that the idea of them all going around with these like iconic long nails just to pop the heads off of birds, like
I'm just gonna keep growing this one thumbnail and filing it.
Remember the little game we used to play in the schoolyard with dandelions and we'd pop their heads off?
I was really scared as to where that was going.
You monster!
Like, I never did that to an animal. I did it to a dandelion.
Okay, I think we should read chapter 2.
Okay. Yeah, it's the grain offerings, so no blood
reading
magic.
chapter 2?
Aww.
I haven't read in a while. I don't mind reading.
Okay, you do it. All right.
All right. When a
You don't know
person
how to
presents an
sit on the
offering
lap?
of meal
There you go. There
to
you
the
go.
Lord, the offering shall be of choice flour. The offerer shall pour oil upon it, lay frankincense on it, and present it to Aaron's sons, the priests. The priests shall scoop out of it a handful of its choice flour and oil, as well as all of its frankincense. And this token portion he shall turn into smoke on the altar, as an offering by fire of pleasing odor to the Lord. And the remainder of the meal offering shall be for Aaron and his sons, a most holy portion from the Lord's offerings by fire. When you present an offering of meal baked in the oven, it shall be of choice flour, unleavened cakes with oil mixed in it, or unleavened wafers spread with oil. If your offering is a meal offering on the griddle, it shall be of choice flour with oil mixed in, unleavened. Break it into bits and pour oil on it. It is a meal offering. If your offering is a meal offering in a pan, it shall be made of choice flour in oil. When you present to the Lord a meal offering that is made in any of these ways, it shall be brought to the priest, who shall take it up to the altar. The priest shall remove the token portion from the meal offering and turn it into smoke on the altar as an offering by fire of pleasing odor to the Lord. And the remainder of the meal offering shall be for Aaron and his sons, a most holy portion from the Lord's offering by fire. No meal offering that you offer to the Lord shall be made with leaven, for no leaven or honey may be turned into smoke as an offering by fire to the Lord.
He really doesn't like yeast.
He really
You
doesn't.
may-
I'm confused about the honey, though.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
You may bring them to the Lord as an offering of choice products.
Because God needs a gluten-free diet.
No, he needs yeast-free, but only if you're burning it. So
Yeah,
Well, that's the
something
only
about
way
leaven.
he eats, apparently. Everything has to be turned into smoke.
Yeah. So you can bring them as an offering of choice products, which we will get to later on. But they shall not be offered up on the altar for a pleasing odor. You shall season your every offering of meal with salt. You shall not omit from your meal offerings the salt of your covenant with God. With all your offerings you must offer salt. If you bring a meal offering of first fruits to the Lord, you shall bring new ears parched with fire, grits of the fresh grain as your meal offering of first fruits. You shall add oil to it and lay frankincense on it. It is a meal offering. And the priest shall turn a token portion of it into smoke, some of the grits and oil with all of the frankincense as an offering by fire to the Lord.
I appreciate that God didn't make the priests eat the frankincense. He ate all the frankincense in his pleasing smoke and just took a nibble of everything else so that they could still eat most of the offering.
So I'm starting to get the impression that this Yahweh character might just be a cloud.
There is the thing that I've brought up many times, which is that back in the day, they thought that the air was spirit. They thought clouds were spiritual. They thought the wind was spiritual. They thought that dust devils were literally devils, and so on. So when you have to turn something into smoke in order for God to eat it, you are turning something from the physical into the spiritual. You're turning it into air.
By burning
Checks
it.
out.
Good way of looking at it.
He's got
Okay.
to keep that
sorry.
glory all shiny.
The good thing here is, at least when they were offering the corn, it wasn't as gruesome as in Children of the Corn when they offered their corn.
Yeah, less blood magic in this one. Who'd have thunk?
Okay, so I'll start with verse 1, a grain offering, in Hebrew, korban mincha. As Rashbam and Chizkuni point out, the basic meaning of mincha is gift or tribute, which is usually given to a king, in Judges 3:15 and 1 Kings 5:1, an aggressive person, Genesis 32:14, or to a priest, in 2 Kings 8:9. According to Levine, the name mincha was appropriated by priestly writers since it expresses the subservient relationship of the worshipper towards God. The finest flour, I actually mentioned it before. In Hebrew, it's solet. This word was I mentioned it in Genesis 18:6, and it designates semolina flour, which is again considered high quality.
I would have assumed
Um,
finely ground.
which is the translation that Altar uses, semolina. Yeah.
Yeah. Verse 2.
What you make pasta from, no?
That's what you
Okay.
make Hube from
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah,
verse 2, a memorial portion. In Hebrew, it's azkarata. The exact meaning of this term is not known. Milgrom comments, 4 renderings of azkarata have suggested. 1, memorial, as in zikaron, given in Sipra Nedaba 9:12. 2, the burnt portion, given by Saadia Gaon, based on Psalms 24, where his skull is paralleled by reduced to ashes. 3, the fragment portion, given by Ibn Ezra, based on Hosea 14:8 and Isaiah 66:3. And 4, invocation portion from his skill, pronounce. In other words, the name of Yahweh is pronounced when this portion is burned. Provisionally, it is best to understand askara as related to zecher, remembrance, referring to the fact that the entire cereal offering should really go up in smoke, and that the portion that does is pars pro toto. It stands for the remainder. In other words, it is a, quote, token portion, end quote. Alternatively, it may derive from the Akkadian zikru, image, counterpart, replica, and hence yield token.
Well, thank you, Tomer. You've shown me where I made my mistake. I mean, as a neo-pagan spiritualist, I couldn't get the incantation right. I thought that it was askarata, but for some reason, when I said the words klatu askarata nikto, it wasn't quite right. Somehow didn't work.
Okay. Verse 3. Verse 3, most holy, in Hebrew, kodesh kodashim, literally holy holies. Paran comments, 2 degrees of holiness should be distinguished between the types of offerings. The most serious is most holy, kodesh kodashim. This degree is attributed to the grain offering, mincha, the sin offering, chata'at, and the guilt offering, asham. The lesser degree of holiness is called holy, kodesh. In Chazal language, easy holies, kodashim kalim. It is attributed to the rest of the gifts for the priests and for the peace offering, zevach shalamim. The most holy was eaten only by the male priests in the temple, whilst the easy holies were allowed to be eaten at a pure place even outside the temple. The offerers were allowed to eat from them, and the priest's family and even his slaves were allowed to take some of the priestly gifts.
So I think it should also be noted that when it comes to this grain offering, how a little bit should, or was it and the priest shall turn its token portion to smoke on the altar. So for that, it might have been a reaction to burning cakes of Ishtar, which was, I believe, in Jeremiah. It was denounced in Jeremiah, right? As is tradition.
I think so.
And now I've got that song in my head: "Smoke on the altar and fire in the sky." Sorry. The joke would be funnier if I didn't have to talk over your barking. Shut the fuck up.
That's his opinion on your comedy.
He would be offended.
He just wants to be a part of it.
Verse 4, thick loaves, in Hebrew, chalot. The Septuagint and Peshitta render cakes, and the Vulgate loaves. Milgrom comments, these cakes are thick relative to the other kind of baked cereal offerings, the wafers, in Hebrew, rekikim. Outside of P, chala occurs only in 2 Samuel 6:19. When this verse is cited by the chronicler, however, chala is changed to kikar in 1 Chronicles 16:3. Perhaps by then, chala has begun to designate the priestly prebend from the bread of dough, compare Numbers 15:20, as prevalent in Mishnaic Hebrew. In any event, the substitution of chala by kikar in post-exilic texts points to its early provenience.
Yeah, I've got some thick cake, and it will not be a guilt offering.
No need for added honey. But by the way, the word challah is the word that people use for that, like Jewish bread.
Traditional
The egg bread that's braided.
It literally just means loaf.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So when you say challah bread, you're just saying loaf bread.
Yes.
Like chai tea, bread, tea.
Love it.
Yes. Verse 10, the rest belongs to Aaron and his sons. Paran comments, it is told in verse 10 that these offerings are to be eaten by Aaron and his sons, but in verses 8 to 9, these offerings are given to the offering priest. It could be, however, that there is no contradiction here. Verse 10 is a general statement indicating that the rest is the priest's portion, and the details of the giving were stated elsewhere and were directed to the offering priest.
But how else is the priest supposed to feed his slaves?
And verse 11, about the honey and the leaven. As was mentioned in previous episode, most scholars understand honey in the Bible as referring to date honey or fruit honey. The exact reason for prohibiting burning honey as a food offering is unknown. The Book of Education offers two possible reasons. One, honey represents the quote unquote sweet life, i.e., the pleasures of life, which could distract a person from following the Torah. And two, honey represents haughtiness, since it brings up much foam, whatever that means. Maimonides, in Guide 346, suggested that honey was used in idol worshipping. Milgrom, however, rejects this, since if it was the case, then the Torah would have prohibited the use of flour, incense, oil, salt, and blood, since they were also common in idol worshipping. As for the leaven, he suggested that the prohibition comes from the association of it with fermentation, decay, and death.
Which would also be kind of weird, because the fact that leaven is the favorite kind of bread for for Jewish festivals, or at least for
Except for Passover.
Right, except for Passover. So the it's no commentary or scholar that I've read has like a good explanation for these, as Tomer already noted. And every explanation seems pretty inconsistent, honestly. There's really not much to say on this. The ban on honey especially, very, very strange. The ban on leaven I might be able to see is like, okay, maybe it's better given directly than as a
Well, and maybe it's a holdover from the whole Feast of Unleavened Bread thing, and whatever origin that came from, that is not especially clear now in reality. You could see that, but yeah, the honey. I mean, land flowing with milk and honey.
Right. Yeah. For Canaan. Yeah.
There might be a connection with the salting that the offerings had. Even the meal offerings have salt on them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. For the salt, which I think we'll probably get to shortly here. The whole thing is it was the preservative, right? It does a very good job of preserving, at least in the ancient world, and the phrase that is used in verse 13, right? Yeah, the salt of the covenant. It would probably be just like, oh, they're preserving this covenant. In fact, we kind of see echoes of that in the New Testament in Matthew, where the apostles are called the salt of the earth. They're preserving.
Yeah, I was going to say that Christians also use the salt metaphor a lot, but I'm just thinking that back in these times, salt was fucking expensive. Oh my God. Like the things.
I mean, they did have the Dead Sea, so maybe.
Well, later, but I mean, the Roman soldiers were literally paid in salt sometimes. So I'm just saying.
I'm a little confused with that, because I mean, it's a rock, and there's
I think refined table salt is
a delicious rock.
Very tasty rocks. Yeah.
Very tasty rocks. Yes.
Yeah.
Speaking of rocks, my dad did the weirdest fucking thing the other day. He came down here and he handed me a rock. And
what type of rock?
Like, it's just a rock, but he like held it up like this, and I was like, why are you showing me this rock? And he's like, because it looks like a face. And I'm like, and I tried to like hold it, and he kept pulling it away because he wanted me to see the face. And I'm like, why are you not letting me touch this rock? Like, is there something special about this? And he just
this is the rock that
like
Jesus
a little.
stood on.
It's a little sad emoji.
It looks like
one of
those
those
little
Pink
dudes
Floyd
from
faces.
Princess Mononoke.
Or like the troll face in the troll meme. That one.
Yeah, for sure. We should send it to Roger at Mud Fossil University for analysis.
Stop. Yes.
Aaron, do you want to read the comments?
Proof
yes.
of gnomes.
Eric Wander, who says, for Tomer and Isaac, why does God not love yeast? What is the reason for that? Did they thought that rising dough was evil? LOL.
Well, I already covered this. So
yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
I think God is just jealous that something else can rise.
Minute Rice says, can we take a second away from the boredom of this book and appreciate Aaron's badass shirt? Well, thank you. Thank you. And
I'm gonna find
then
more info about it.
Truthful Serpent offers $5. I like the name. And says, see, Leviticus is what happens when I help free 2 kids from the great red Wookiee's terrarium. No good deed goes unpunished.
Fair.
Oh,
Okay, verse 12, an offering of the first fruits. In Hebrew, korban reshit. Levine comments, Hebrew reshit is ambiguous. It can mean first in order or sequence, or foremost in terms of quality. These two meanings are not mutually exclusive, but they differ nonetheless. As in Deuteronomy 26, verses 2 and 10, reshit is here to be understood as positional. First fruits, referring to offerings of the first fruits or produce of the land. Thus, before the Israelites were permitted to enjoy the bounty of the land, they were required to offer God some of what was his. This process is known as desacralization. Such offerings were, in fact, among those usually placed before God rather than burnt on the altar.
I think actually, yeah, this verse 12 is, I think it's saying if you cannot bring honey or leaven or honey to be turned into smoke by fire to the Lord, but you may bring them as offerings of choice products, like if you bring dates and stuff, even though they have honey in them, and bread, you may bring them, but
Yeah,
they
your
should
tithe.
be put up on the altar for a pleasing odor. So you can bring them as gifts to the priests as part of the first fruits, whatever, but they shouldn't be burned on the altar.
How
And then,
convenient.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm. So this is a
and then
sort of
14 is talking about specifically when you bring a meal offering of first fruits, which is
Yeah.
a combination,
yeah.
I guess.
Yes, I'll get to that. Verse 13, the salt of the covenant. Bamberger comments, in ancient times, as often today, agreements were sealed with a formal meal. To take salt together was a symbolic way of concluding a pact. The Bible, therefore, describes a solemn covenant as a covenant of salt. See also in Numbers 18:19 and 2 Chronicles 13:5. Verse 14, a grain offering of first fruits. In Hebrew, minchat bikurim. Some commentators, like the Sifra, Rashi, and Rashbam, wrote that this offering is similar to the sheaf, Hebrew omer, mentioned in 23:11. Since the omer commandment is mandatory, they've interpreted the word if, im, to mean when. Others, however, like Ibn Ezra, Lutzato, and Paran, wrote that this is a completely different offering. Paran, for example, writes, first, as in all other readings, im is a conditional word. Therefore, the grain offering of first fruits was obligatory and not mandatory. Second, on the day of the sheaf weaving, an offering is given alongside a lamb, which was made of double the amount of semolina than the usual daily offering in 23:13. If so, there is no room for another first fruits offering. Third, the sheaf called the first grain of the harvest is being waved, but it doesn't say that it was presented on the altar. On the contrary, according to verse 12 in our chapter, the first fruits offering isn't given on the altar, but is given to the priests. And that's it for my commentary on this. Yeah,
Okay.
these chapter 3?
Oh, sorry. I was muted.
Sorry.
So that was my bad. So I did actually have something here about the honey inclusion. So this is from Nihan's book. As to Leviticus 2:11-13, this passage is also generally regarded as a later addition to Leviticus 2, probably in 2 stages, in particular because of the change in address. However, this phenomenon may not be taken as a sure indication of a different layer, especially if, as argued above, the transition from third to second person is original in verses 1-10. The prohibition against leaven actually summarizes the general principle underlying the law on raw and baked cereal offerings in verses 1-3 and 4-10. The change in address probably serves to emphasize this device. Verse 11a forbids the offering of leavened dough, whereas the second part of the verse states the rationale for this prohibition. So leaven and honey must never be burnt on the altar. The prohibition of adding leaven to the offering of cereals seems to be older than P. It is implied, for instance, in the polemical statement of Amos 4:5, so that its presence in the original version of Leviticus 2 seems logical. The mention of honey may surprise at first because the term does not occur previously in Leviticus 2. However, it is unnecessary to consider it a later gloss. Traditionally, which Tomer noted both the explanations that have been given, The most compelling remains that the common denominator between leaven and honey is their propensity to fermentation, and that would be the bubbling up, right? Which was well known in antiquity, especially in the case of leaven. From this perspective, the prohibition of offering leaven and honey on the altar highlights the difference between profane and sacred realms. As the abode of the deity, the sanctuary must be protected from the process of death and decay. Alternatively, it has been argued that the prohibition of offering leaven and honey on the altar should be connected this is the one that we covered that just didn't make much sense at all. Wait, I had something else here noted.
Does that mean if I drink fizzy water, it's like unholy water because God doesn't like fizz?
If you consider that fermentation, perhaps.
I mean, I don't think pressing a little
kombucha.
button on I hate kombucha.
I don't like it.
All right, Lawrence, did you have more on that?
No, that was
All right. Well,
I
guess
had
we will...
one. I had
Yes.
one thing. So we mentioned the salt with the offerings and stuff. So there's like a Jewish tradition, I guess, that you always have salt with meals, and like the table that you eat upon is like an altar to God. So it's like when you have a meal on Shabbat, for example, you will have you'll have bread, and you will have salt on the table and dip the bread in the salt. Somehow it's like, I think there's some sort of analogy with the offerings that we're talking about.
Okay. So Dr. Mordecai Cassius Marcellus Jones offers $2 with no message. Thank you very much for the $2. All right, I will go ahead and read Leviticus 3 with all the gravitas that it deserves.
It's talking about barbecue, Armin.
Yeah. So I should do my best Julia Child. If your offering is a fellowship... If your offering is a fellowship offering, and you offer an animal from the herd, whether male or female, you are to present it before the Lord, an animal without defect. You are to lay your hand on the head of your offering and slaughter it at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Then Aaron's sons, the priests, shall splash the blood against the walls of the meeting.
Blood magic!
From the fellowship altering, you are to bring a food offering to the Lord, the internal organs, and all the fat that is connected to them, both kidneys with the fat on them near the loins, and the long lobe of the liver, which you will remove with the kidneys. Then Aaron's sons are to burn it on the altar on top of the burnt offering that is lying on top of the burning wood. It is a food offering, an aroma pleasing for the Lord. If you offer an animal from the flock as a fellowship offering to the Lord, then you are to offer a male or female without defect. We have to specify you can give a male or a female without defect. We don't want any third options here. If you offer a lamb, you are to present it before the Lord. Lay your hand on its... Shut up, dog! Damn it!
Dare you interrupt something so important?
Yeah.
I know, and so interesting.
These are the
Then
words of the living
Aaron's
God.
sons... I'm sorry.
Go on.
Shut up! I'm going to start throwing things at that dog. Okay. Then Aaron's sons shall splash its blood against the sides of the altar. From the fellowship offering, you are to bring a food offering to the Lord. Its fat, the entire fat tail cut off, loose from the backbone, the internal organs, and all the fat that is connected to them, both kidneys with the fat on them near the loins, and the long lobe of the liver, which you may remove with the kidneys. And the priest shall burn them on the altar as a food offering to the Lord. If you're offering... Shut up! If your offering is a goat, you are to present it before the Lord. Lay your hand on its head and slaughter it in front of the tent of the meeting. Then Aaron's sons shall splash its bloods against the side of the altar. I'm seeing a pattern here. It doesn't seem to matter what
Blood
it is. Kill
magic,
it,
everybody drink.
Kill it, blood everywhere. Then from what you offer, you are to present this food offering to the Lord, the internal organs and all the fat is connected to them, both kidneys and the fat on them near the loins and the long lobe of the liver. Have I not just read this twice before? Which you will remove with the kidneys. Whether it's a goat or the fat of the lamb, why do we have to give a completely different set of instructions when they're all identical? Whatever the fuck it is, rip the kidneys out and spill the blood everywhere. Then the priest shall burn them on the altar as a food offering, a pleasing aroma before all the fat is the Lord's. This is a lasting ordinance for the generations to come. Wherever you live, you must not eat any fat or any blood. And I'm looking at you, England.
Cursed Brits. That's why the Lord has forsaken them, I suppose. It's weird that it mentions a herd animal, and then a flock animal, and then a goat, which is a herd animal. Why
I think it says the herd animals, and then it does of the herd animals, and it starts with a sheep and then a goat.
They all have kidneys and a liver lobe and fat on their internal organs. We don't need to go over this.
It seems they don't have the benefit of the redactor.
I mean, I got a little confused because I thought I was reading the same thing again that I had just read. No, this one's about the goat. This one's different. But it's exactly the same. If it's a goat,
the only difference is the sheep has a fatty tail, and that's it.
Yeah,
that's
if it's a herd offering versus if it's a goat.
So God likes giblets and fat.
So it starts off general, and then it goes specific, and then
you're supposed to go on like a paleo high protein diet, but with none of the fat.
And
just
apparently
be excessively cruel and spill blood everywhere. That's what I got out of that.
Yep, all the blood for the Lord. But you cannot offer a bird as a fellowship offering.
When it says herd, it means cattle.
I had a Bible school teacher who believed in what he called, the doctrine of food. Basically, that everything about life and religion had to do with finding and sharing meals. And, every major life event, you get married, everybody gets together and you eat. You die, everyone gets together and you eat. You're born, everyone gets together and you eat. And that was sort of the linchpin in religion, but also in human connection. And I would hope the fellowship offering was about that, because I do love to share barbecue, but I don't like to sprinkle blood everywhere. So
as Jews say, as Jews say, they tried to kill us, we survived. Let's eat.
Yes.
Yeah.
Every Jewish holiday.
And we can see a bit of that in the remaining ancestor worship groups that still exist today, where they will traditionally offer a portion of whatever the hell they're doing for their festival into the fire for the ancestor spirits.
Right.
And now Truthful Serpent offers $5 and says, see, Leviticus is what happens when I help.
You already read that.
I already read that one. Yeah.
Yes.
It's getting difficult because things are so redundant today.
We're stuck in a time loop.
It's just the third version of it. It's fine.
Bryce Barnett says, finally caught up on all the Blasphemers Bible episodes. I'm so curious. P-Town, what, if anything, could change your mind on what your religious position is? Is your position falsifiable?
I don't know how to answer that question, because if there's something that would convince me otherwise, then I obviously don't know about it yet.
Well, have you ever thought of what hypothetically would convince you X, Y, Z? It would convince me that I was wrong. Not saying it actually exists.
When it comes to, I have said something before, I think it might have been on the show, but when it comes to, like, I would be convinced of evolution if you could make a humanitang. Like,
so if you could do something evolution doesn't do, then you'd be convinced of the thing that it isn't?
That's an example of falsifiability.
Claim that they've done it.
But that doesn't make any sense. You and I need to have a conversation about evolution, because like all creationists, you have no idea what it even is.
Yeah, if evolution started doing magical things, that would kind of confirm a supernatural conclusion.
Yeah, a humangatang, really?
So I think
That
Yeah,
you have the same reaction that I had, Aaron. It was the atheist evolutionists who were saying that this has been done.
no such thing
Except
as
that
an
nobody, no, that
So,
didn't.
hold on,
Nobody said that, and that's not evolution anyway. Evolution is an explanation of It's the only explanation of biodiversity.
right.
Yeah,
Okay. So
even
before I would
Christians
like to,
say
Yeah.
evolution is how God chose to do things.
yeah, with like Ken Miller, for example. Yeah. So I
And
think
Dobzhansky as well.
so.
Theodosius Dobzhansky. Yeah.
I think one of the things. So, are you asking P-Town? Because I can take this this same kind of polemic and go to what you might actually be looking for. And correct me if I'm wrong. Is it a transitional form? Is that what you're looking for?
No, it was just late night. The only time I've said something related to this type of question was late night when, a few atheists were claiming that they'd made a humangatang and a humanzi or something. I can't
I think
remember.
you've been trolled, bro.
I didn't believe it, but anyway, I told them if you could prove that, then yeah, you would have me convinced. But I mean,
I can't
if
even
you could-
imagine why, since that would be completely irrelevant to evolution.
There was the similar thing with like Ray Comfort and the crocoduck thing, right? So like
I guess it would prove that we're
Oh,
related
God.
if we could crossbreed.
No, it would prove, actually, it would, if anything, it would disprove our modern understanding of evolution. That's, people got to stop asking for things as evidence of evolution that evolution explicitly says are impossible.
I didn't
It's
ask.
like
No,
saying,
in this case, we don't actually know if we can do if we were to do an artificial insemination kind of thing, laboratory experiments. Almost certainly we could create
I
a
do
human.
not
Almost certainly
volunteer
could.
as tribute.
With a
Stephen
That's
chimpanzee,
the
but
problem. Nobody
No.
wants to do
Orangutan.
that.
Yeah, Dean
Yeah.
Koontz explored that in one of his books, Everywhere, I think. Anyway, he did an alternate universe where humans did the genetic manipulation to create smarter chimps or dumber humans, depending on which way you want to go with that, and it wound up with basically a creature with the intelligence of a 6-year-old that could speak, but had terrific tendencies towards violence, and it became one of the monsters in the story.
So let's take
Yeah,
for
makes
let's take it
sense.
for instance, just be hypothetical. So let's say that somebody has no ethics. They have money and resources, but no ethics, and so they do the artificial insemination. And even because we are 98 to 99% genetically identical, of course, as everybody predicted, it's possible when you do an artificial insemination thing, we create a humanzi. Then the creationist who yesterday said that this is the thing that they would take for them to change their mind, now find out the new information and then don't change their mind. They just come up with an excuse for, well, we look so similar because God devised our DNA to look similar, and that's why we're so similar, and so that just proves creationism again.
That is
So
what happened the last dozen
so
times.
that's what always happens is the goalpost then moves. When they say we'll never find evidence of half a wing, and then we find half a wing, and when it says you're never going to find a fish with feet, and then we find fish with feet. Whenever they say whatever the goalpost is going to be, and then we meet that goal, they move the goalpost again because the belief matters more than the truth does.
Yeah, regardless, this should not be falsifying your belief. You need to think of something that actually would falsify your belief, not something that, if it were to actually happen, you would find some way to.
Yeah,
to
because
get around it.
it's never been evolution versus Christianity. They're completely separate ideology spheres.
I just want to say that I think we're a bit off topic.
Oh, very.
Just we just want to.
I have
From
drunk this
Leviticus.
whole thing. We might need to
All right.
move on.
Yes.
All right.
It
Okay.
wasn't all liquor.
I had
My
too much fun with Leviticus 3.
Okay. I'll start my commentary. So first one, a fellowship offering, in Hebrew zevach shelamim. The term shelamim has been debated since antiquity. Vulgate, Peshitta, and Rashi derive shelamim from shalom, peace. Rashi explains that they either give peace to the world or that through them there is peace, quote unquote, to the altar, to the priests, and to the owners. Levine argues that Shelamim originally meant tribute or gift of greeting. He writes, in a Ugaritic epic, Keret, the king of a besieged city, offered Shalamuma to the commander of the attacking forces in an effort to induce him to withdraw the siege. In Akkadian texts, we find a cognate term, Shulmanu, that literally means a gift of greeting, such as was presented by vassals to their suzerains when they visited them or by emissaries on a mission to their allies. This meaning reflects the word of greeting, which is shalom in Hebrew and is expressed by similar words in Ugaritic and Akkadian. The shelamim is offered when one greets another by saying shalom. In the cult, the shelamim assumed the form of an animal sacrifice offered to God when one came before him to greet him at a sacred meal. It was adopted as the name of a particular sacrifice because it expressed the fellowship experienced by the worshippers and priests in God's presence as they greeted their divine guest.
I remember when I was a Christian, and it was something very meaningful to me. And I had this moment about communion where I thought, being part of this, bread and wine or crackers and grape juice or whatever version of this little thing you nibble is a part of it. I am a part of this greater thing throughout human history. The millions and millions of Christians before me and after me and at the same time as me who all partook of this simple thing, this bit of bread and wine or whatever, in whatever form. Maybe you ripped off the bread, maybe you had the little pre-made cracker, whatever, but it was part of the great community. And that's one of the things I think that religious acts and religious ceremonies give us, is this sort of connection with this whole section of the human family, and a moment where we're sort of connected to that, and a very small part of the greater whole, but part of it nonetheless. If I miss anything from religion, I think it's that.
Okay.
Okay.
I got nothing
sorry.
out of religion at all. I mean, honestly, it's one of the things that are just a huge mystery to me. Where is the value in some guy who clearly doesn't know what he's talking about, asserting things to be true that he can't know to be true and that are evidently not true? Where is the value in that?
That's the sermon. That's different.
But there's value in truth, though, right?
Yeah, and you don't have any in religion. That's the problem.
It's interesting here, this fellowship offering. I think there's one thing that stands me apart compared to most Christians. For the most part, I don't think I experienced that fellowship with God that apparently a lot of other Christians do, but I'm looking forward to it one day.
So
Town, I'm sorry to tell you they don't. We were all just desperately trying to feel it, so we looked like we were feeling it from the outside.
Fake it till you make it.
Well, I've talked to more than one of my friends that was also a former believer and deconstructed at the same time as I did. And we were both like, you were so experiencing the Holy Spirit. Well, actually, I was just really trying to experience the Holy Spirit. And I thought you were really experiencing the Holy Spirit. And so many of these.
Yeah, that kind of experience can come from like a whole bunch of circumstances. Like for some people, they like whatever that, I think, what's it called? The is the word qualia? Is that it? Like
No.
that,
yeah,
like, yeah, that kind of feeling that you get of like reverence and awe, like that, and you're being part of something bigger, kind of thing, right? That feeling can be experienced in a lot of different ways, and for some people, they do actually attain that feeling through religion, but they can also attain that feeling at music festivals and stuff like that.
Meditation and all sorts of, because it's something within yourself that you're tapping into and bringing forth. The ritual is just supposed to make it easier to do, and then the preacher man is there to tell you, oh, that's not you, that's God. You can only get that from God. It's also the
narrative. As humans, we live in stories, and part of what gives our life meaning is the story that we write with it. And it's one of the reasons storytellers are so important, because you can take a collection of independent events and make it into a narrative that is worth telling, worth reading, worth living. And that's, I think, what religion historically has tapped into and is failing really hard to tap into right now. Because, oh my God, the cope. But that connection and that greater narrative and the smaller narratives, those have real appeal, and they do feed something in us as human beings.
Now, P-Town and I have already got a couple of tentative shows we haven't yet put a schedule on that we need to do. But there's a couple of different topics that he and I agreed to talk about at another time. And since he just said the thing that bothers me the most, I mean, the big reason that I am not religious, there is no truth in any religion, but there are a hell of a lot of lies in all of them. He said the truth matters. I so want to explore that. So
I think we can all
we
agree
really
that
need to
truth
schedule
matters.
that one.
It comes down as like, the thing is, because I'm in religious studies, so I've been studying like a lot of religious traditions. The definition of what is true, like, we're not, because what Aaron is talking about is, probably what is ontologically true. Like, if you go back into the past, you will see X, Y, and Z kind of thing. Which for like the creation stories, no, sorry, that's not true in that case. But if you take the original meaning that it would have been read with, and that requires its historical context, it could have some truth, but it's not the same type of truth as it's not the kind of ontological truth that
it's not I am holding a cup.
Yeah, it's not that
This
kind
is
of truth.
true.
Right. Yeah. So like if you take these stories as not this part specifically, this is Leviticus, this is legal stuff, and like ritualistic stuff, that is like, here is what you should literally do for a proper sacrifice. But if you take something like the primeval narrative, right? So Genesis 1 through 11, if you take those things in their historical contexts, at least the stories in their historical contexts, then you understand how the ancient readers would have been understanding them, and through that you could gain maybe not necessarily truth, but like you at least gain their perspective, like the community's perspective on certain events, with the Tower of Babel. If that would be, it is of course a far more mythologized version of the actual ziggurat in Ur, right? I think is in Ur, I forget, but
Ur of the Chaldees, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. So but it is in reference to an actual ziggurat, and this was the community's, like, when they mythologized it that way, put it into this primeval narrative, they gave it a more kind of a polemical sense, and in that you can understand their perspective on the things that were happening in Babylon and how they felt about that. So in that historical context, you can understand the text, but you don't get to the ontological truth that is like, I am holding a cup.
Yeah, so I want to have a conversation with P-Town, one, about evolution, where he says that he would accept evolution if, and then he gives this ridiculous thing that evolution doesn't even permit or talk about, which is what creationists always do. I would be convinced of evolution if a fish decided to grow
let me just
two
emphasize,
legs and walk out of the water.
I'm on the panel late at night. 4 people are telling me that there is a humanity out there.
No, nobody.
Wait, wait.
Not this panel.
Wait, I'm feeling like we're diverging on the topic too much, and I would like to.
I want to get back to it too. What I was saying is, I want to have the conversation with P-Town about the truth of his religion, because truth matters to me. He said truth matters to him. I bet it doesn't. I want to have that conversation. He said what it would take for him to understand evolution. I want to have that conversation. And then Peter, I think there's 2 other things that P-Town and I said that at some point we would schedule conversations on these topics, but I can't remember what they were. I think
and abortion.
P-Town, I have a homework assignment for you about evolution when you're like awake and shit. Basically, I have never encountered a creationist who demonstrated an understanding of evolution on any level ever. And I asked P.Z. Myers this question to be sure that, I ran it by an actual biologist who knew what he was talking about. To demonstrate an understanding of evolution at a level that, we could have a productive conversation about it, I would suggest that you ask yourself, see if you could answer the question, why is it impossible for a griffin to evolve? According to evolution, presuming evolution is true, why is it impossible for a griffin to evolve? I'll even just say on Earth, leaving any other, So that question, like write it down if you want, sleep on it, all that other stuff.
What a griffin is.
Half lion, half eagle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That,
Oh, no, yeah,
or
that's
a
not
hippogriff if you prefer, you can do that too.
Yeah,
it doesn't
the
Or
matter.
a Pegasus, just to keep it easy.
Just
Yeah,
to be
with
on
wings.
on topic, what in reverse? What would get most of the panel to accept that the 3 chapters that we just read was the Word of God? What would it, why would you accept this, panel?
Whichever you
About
find
the
easier.
sacrificing?
Yeah.
A clear and
Ugh.
falsifiable definition of God that can actually be discussed in clear terms. Falsifiable evidence that God exists, a proposition which would disprove it, which can be repeatedly tested and thereafter is tested and then falsified. And then we would have to look into, depending on the definition of the God given and how that God was, described, then we would have to address whether or not this particular thing was the word of God. But I would say this is a very petty God.
And it wouldn't be something like preposterous that nobody says anyways, like a humanity or a shrubbery or whatever.
A shrubbery.
God wrote this. Yeah.
No, it would basically be. I always want a clear definition of the kind of God we're talking about. Something that is not so bland and just all over the place that we might be talking about the interaction of subatomic particles at the birth of the universe, or the warm and fuzzy feeling I feel within my heart when I look upon a rainbow. Like,
Look at
you
the
need to be
trees. Look at the
specific.
sunset. That's
Exactly.
God.
You need specifics. We need something specific enough to actually discuss, clear, with the capacity to be falsifiable or partially falsifiable, and we could refine it if it was only partially falsifiable.
Okay,
But
so
that's
real quick,
where you have to start.
before we get back to the topic, I said we should discuss whether there is truth in religion, truth in our position. I show you the truth of my position. You fail to show me the truth of yours. Then there was what it would take to get you to accept evolution as a thing. And then you said there were 2 other ones. One of them was just abortion, which why would I just argue abortion? That
whether or not I think it was whether or not the Bible supports or
Right. It was that.
whether
It
whether
was
the
the
Bible
bit about abortion and the where the
Right.
priests
The
forced
abortion. If you cause an abortion accidentally, you pay a fine.
Yeah.
Okay,
That
and
one.
then what was the other one, P-Town?
Biblical
cosmology.
cosmology.
Yeah, it was
Cosmology.
about the flat Earth.
Biblical cosmology.
Yeah.
Lovely.
I mean,
Oh,
I've-
biblical. Yes,
I think
that's right.
To be fair,
Biblical cosmology.
for a better because cosmology is the improper term here. Cosmic geography is what it would be called.
mythological cosmic geography in this
So
case.
Wikipedia is wrong. Okay.
But it's also about the creation, no? Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, so talking about
Well,
the
thank you for
pettiness
that
of gods.
list. We need to schedule all 4 of these separate discussions.
I'm flattered. When it comes to evolution, you'll be teaching me more. I mean, I just need to learn more about it. I've watched most of your stuff.
You've
Have you
watched
watched
the
the
systemic classification
systematic?
of life?
I think so, yeah.
Jinx.
Don't
Okay.
quiz me right now, but
Yeah, I don't know where we can go if you've watched that, and what else can I tell you? I would just anyway. But anyway, let's go ahead and read on. I think I had a little bit.
Yeah,
too much
I
fun.
see comments. Do you want me to start, or do you want to read the comments?
You're right. I got to catch up with these comments. How far down am I?
There's only 2, I think.
I think it's
Yeah,
3.
three.
Yeah.
All right. So it starts with Okay, Truthful Serpent. Yes, I do miss the community I had with religion. I wish atheists had their own churches where we got together and have community. There are some attempts at that kind of thing, but it's not something that I personally need. So I don't dive into those.
Key Jump has a church.
Find your local gaming meetup. That's your
Yeah, play D&D. There you go.
I live in
Become a LARPer.
I live in a country that's predominantly atheist,
Redundant.
and people get that kind of community through sports or hobbies or other activities that they have in common. There's no need for an atheist
Cheese.
church. You can find community everywhere you want.
cheese.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I get
that's the
community
thing.
there.
Nobody's going to meet about, let's celebrate not having religion together.
Yeah.
Although there are free thought conventions where they're like, hey, we're not shackled by this nonsense anymore.
You might be
And there are
surprised to find out
secular
there's a,
organizations if you want to do charity and help your fellow human beings as well, like atheists helping the homeless, recovering from religion, etc.
Yep.
the Dallas Fort Worth Coalition of Reason is a coalition of a couple of dozen different free thought groups within the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex that are all social groups that meet up in different bars or restaurants or whatever, and then they go to concerts together, and then they throw parties together, and it's all that kind of thing. So yeah. And then let me see, what was the next one? Bryce Barnett. Oh, by the way, I should also mention that you collect snakes, you'll be in a whole nother community with a whole bunch of new overlapping circle of friends.
Every time we go to an expo, someone recognizes Aaron.
Yeah. So
Overlap.
Bryce Barnett says, didn't mean to inspire going off topic. Just really quick, P-Town, do you know what falsifiability is? If so, can you describe it? Just so we know you understand the concept.
If something's able to be proven false, or how much something can be proven false.
Yeah, if
mechanism
it matters to you
method
what the
uses.
truth is, how would you prove it wrong if it is wrong? How would you know if it's wrong?
I could actually give an example that I think would be relevant to our previous conversation. During his life, when he described the initial understanding of evolutionary theory by descent with modification, Charles Darwin predicted that because dinosaurs and birds essentially had the same skeleton, but with fused wing fingers, that a bird would be found with unfused wing fingers, but it would be a bird. And Archaeopteryx was found in his lifetime, but it was
2
found
years.
after he made that prediction. And it is a bird. It has full flight feathers, but not only does it have unfused wing fingers, but teeth. So it was originally misidentified as a dinosaur.
To be fair, I think that'd be more classified as predictability rather than falsifiability.
Yes.
Yeah, that's correct. Because what
Sorry.
you have to do is you set up a hypothetical situation, whereas if you're correct, and then here's one of the things you should not find. We should not find a Pegasus. You can't have a mammal.
Cambrian.
You can't have a mammal in the Cambrian. You can't have a mammal with bird feathers.
It works like this. Like, let's say the geologic column. That's easy for everybody to understand. You wouldn't find certain kinds of animals in the strata that's older, right? That would disprove evolution over time. But because that's a falsifiable prediction. So, like, if we did find that, then evolution would be false. But with religion isn't falsifiable, because you could say, hey, well, that didn't that weird thing happened because it was a miracle from magic and from God.
I'm sorry again that I'm interjecting, but we are 20 minutes off topic, so please keep it short.
Well, somebody had to throw that question out there. Okay, so Zarnar and Carr. So I'm behind on the video, but I just had to comment on how bloody this book is. Not only does God seem to like killing people, but he loves killing animals too. And I thought Doom was gory. So
and bathing in their blood.
Wait until we get to Solomon and the temple.
Oh,
the holiday
no.
sacrifices.
Okay, so to make up for lost time, let me dive into this thing again. We got 35
Wait.
verses. And I'm gonna
Wait,
jump
No,
in.
no, no,
Tom,
no.
I
We
have
have
to say it.
I haven't finished my commentary.
Yes!
There we go.
Did you hear how Tomer savored that he got to say those words?
Savored. Okay. Verse 3, the internal organs. More accurate is the fat that covers the entrails, according to KJV and JPS. The word that is translated to fat is chelev. According to Levine, the chelev is a specific type of fat, that which covers or surrounds the kidneys, liver, and entrails. It doesn't refer to the ordinary fat that adheres to the flesh of an animal, called shuman. Milgrom comments that while the reasons for reserving the suet for the deity are not clear, the word chelev was associated with the best. For example, the fat chelev of the land in Genesis 45:18, and the finest kernels, chelev of wheat, in Deuteronomy 32:14, and so the best is given to God.
Okay.
You probably already know this, Tomer, but the Russian word for bread is the same.
Okay.
Chleb.
Yeah, chleb.
Okay.
It's a miracle.
Verse 9, the entire fat tail. Hebrew, chelbo ha'aliyah temima. KJV reads the fat and the whole rump, and JPS broad tail. Bamberger comments, in the Near East, sheep wear and are of a variety having a heavy tail consisting largely of fat. It weighs 10 pounds or 5 kilograms or more, and it is considered a delicacy. The Greek writer Herodotus in Persian Wars 3:113 tells of little carts used by shepherds to support the tails of the sheep and prevent them from being broken. The same device is mentioned in the Mishnah Shabbat 5:4, some 6 centuries later. The punctuation of the English rendering, broad tail, implies that the tail was among the fat portions reserved for the altar and so by implication forbidden as human food. This conclusion was actually drawn by the Karaite sect, but rabbinic tradition permitted the fat tail of non-sacrificial sheep to be eaten.
You know, if I was God, I wouldn't give a fuck about what fat is the best fat. Who cares? That's what I have for you there.
Verse
Really.
17. Sorry.
We just
Go
want the fat closest to the butthole. Give me
I
that
just-
butthole
I'm
fat.
5 days straight barbecuing.
Oh,
There's different types of fat.
okay.
Okay. Verse 17.
Yep.
A lasting
That's okay.
ordinance for the generations to come wherever you live. Paran comments, this is a typical closing sentence for the priestly law in the Torah. We see this also in 23:14 and 21:31. This sentence comes at the end of several matters to emphasize their validity and eternity. Sometimes only the phrase a lasting ordinance for the generation appears without mentioning the settlement in Exodus 27:21 and Leviticus 7 verses 35-36. From the phrase wherever you live or in all your settlements, Chazal learned that the law applies both in the land of Israel and outside of it. However, examining the laws where this phrase appears reveals that some of them apply only in the land, like the commandment of the first grain and the first fruit in 23 verses 14 and 21. The term "the land of your settlement" in Numbers 15:2 indicates that this refers to the land of Israel. It's doubtful if there was any thought of the exile in the historical horizon of the author. And finally, you must not eat any fat or any blood. So Levine comments, the principal statement on the prohibition against eating blood occurs in 17 verses 10 to 12, where its rationale is given and where its larger implications will be explained. The fact that the two prohibitions are listed together here has led some to seek a common basis for prohibiting both. They belong to God as sacrificial offerings. There is, however, much that is distinctive to the blood prohibition over and above the utilization of blood in sacrificial rites.
So that explains what culture Sprat came from.
I don't know what Sprat is.
Jack
It's a-
Sprat.
It's a nursery
Okay.
rhyme.
Okay. I don't know.
Jack Sprat can eat no
Sprat
fat.
could eat no fat. His wife could eat no lean. And
Oh,
between the two of them, they licked the platter clean.
Okay.
Yes, it's a very old nursery rhyme, but if indeed it is written by a priestly source, then yes, exile would be foremost in their mind, and so the distinction between what had to be done all the time versus what had to be done but only when you had a temple to do it at would be a significant distinction.
Yeah, so this last verse where it talks about the you may not eat fat or any blood. Orthodox Jews consider it to be a law for everyone, not everyone, for all Jewish people in all places, not just in Israel. And they can be, it's actually very specific, and there aren't like, you can't find like a book written of like what fats are forbidden and what not. It's supposed to be something that is just passed down, practically from like a butcher to apprentice sort of thing. And it's very particular, and sometimes it is not economically feasible to remove the fat from certain parts of the body, and therefore a lot of kosher slaughtered animals are actually some parts of those animals are actually not sold on as kosher meat. They are then sold to the general market. So sometimes you might, if you buy like the hindquarters of a sheep or a goat or whatever, it's very possible that could have came from a kosher slaughtered animal, and they just didn't have the skills or people who could clean out the blood and the certain veins as well that are forbidden in the back leg and whatever. So yeah.
You have forbidden veins in the back leg.
It's a separate thing. It's called the Gid HaNasher. It's something to do with, the story where Jacob is wrestling the angel.
Yeah, that's what I thought it referred to.
Yeah, so the angel touches the nerve, so it's like that nerve is forbidden to eat, and it's very difficult to remove, and it's like it takes a certain profession to remove that, and then there's the fat and whatever. So a lot of times the whole rear of the animal is just sold to general market, not sold as kosher.
Okay. Isaac, do you still only eat kosher?
Me? No.
Yeah. Oh.
Me neither.
I avoid pork actually because I don't think it's as healthy, and because I didn't grow up with it, I don't have that I don't know, need for it, I guess.
You have not enjoyed a bacon double cheeseburger?
No, I've had it all. I've eaten everything, but because I didn't grow up with it, I don't have that sort of I don't know, nostalgia or whatever. So when I go out to eat, I'm always gonna choose, not always, but most of the time I will choose the beef or chicken option.
Yeah, me too.
Then acquired a taste
for health reasons.
I don't need bacon to live. Thank you.
Yeah, I kind of went a slightly different way. I mean, I choose not to eat pork often. I mean, I haven't completely given up. Like every time somebody offers me bacon, I'll probably take that. But for the most part, I don't eat pork because I had my daughter's pig was living in my house for a little while, and I kind of got used to having a pig around.
Yeah, that's another thing. Yeah, pigs are very intelligent.
Oh yeah. You look in their eyes, and I've looked into humans' eyes and not seen a soul, but you can do it with a pig.
That's the reason I don't eat octopus. They're just way too fucking smart.
Oh, and I'm so with you on the octopus.
Yeah. I feel guilty every time I have calamari, but I have a lot of really good Greek restaurants near me, so...
Squid's another matter. They're freaking monsters.
Yeah.
They're also cephalopods,
but they're not as smart as.
More tasty.
Okay, well, thank you
matters.
for making me feel not as bad about my calamari.
Just a quick question: could we extend the session for the last time?
Yeah, I can stick around a little longer.
We can do one more
The
chapter.
quicker we get through Leviticus, the better.
Yeah. Eric Wander
are a sage.
gifted one RN
Thank you very
Raw
much.
membership. Okay. All right. Are we going to attempt to read Leviticus 4? Or are we just
You
going to
want me to read?
Leviticus 4 is long.
As
35
I
verses.
offered this, my commentary is like 3 pages, so it's not that.
It's 3 pages, so it's not
So
that
when
long.
I don't know, when you say pages, I don't know how big that is.
3 pages for me is a lot.
It
Did you know
depends on
that
how
American-
we
3
interrupt.
pages. That was like chapters 1 and 2 that I read. These were 3 pages.
Did you know, Tomo, that in America they don't use the standard page sizes? They have their own page sizes.
That's how I don't care.
Excellent response.
They don't use
Do
A4
you
and
want me to
A5.
read-
They use like letter.
Do you want me to read?
If you want
fine, be that way.
Okay, I'll read. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelite people thus. When a person unwittingly incurs guilt in regard to any of the Lord's commandment about things not to be done and does one of them, if it is the anointed priest who has incurred guilt, so that blame falls upon the people, he shall offer the sin of which he is guilty, a bull of the herd without blemish, as a sin offering to the Lord. He shall bring the bull to the entrance of the tent of meeting before the Lord, and lay his hand upon the head of the bull. The bull shall be slaughtered before the Lord. And the anointed priest shall take some of the bull's blood and bring it into the tent of meeting. The priest shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle of the blood 7 times before the Lord in front of the curtain of the shrine. The priest shall put some of the blood on the horns of the altar of aromatic incense, which is in the tent of meeting, before the Lord. And all the rest of the bull's blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar of burnt offering, which is at the entrance of the tent of meeting. He shall remove all the fat. He shall remove all the fat from the bull of sin offering, the fat that covers the entrails and all the fat that is about the entrails, the 2 kidneys and the fat that is on them, that is at the loins, and the protuberance on the liver, which he shall remove from with the kidneys, just as it is removed from the ox of the sacrifice of well-being. The priest shall turn them into smoke on the altar of burnt offering. But the hide of the bull, and all its flesh, as well as its head and legs, its entrails, and its dung, all the rest of the bull, he shall carry to a clean place outside the camp to the ash heap, and burn it up on the wood. Up in a wood fire. It shall be burnt on the ash heap. If it is the whole community of Israel that has erred, and that matter escapes the notice of the congregation, so that they do any of the things which by the Lord's commandments ought not to be done, and they realize their guilt, when the sin through which they incurred guilt becomes known, the congregation shall offer a bull of the herd as a sin offering, and bring it before the tent of meeting. The elders of the community shall lay their hands upon the head of the bull before the Lord, and the bull shall be slaughtered before the Lord. The anointed priest shall bring some of the blood of the bull into the tent of meeting, and the priest shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle of it 7 times before the Lord in front of the curtain. Some of the blood he shall put on the horns of the altar which is before the Lord in the tent of meeting, and all the rest of the blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar of burnt offering, which is at the entrance of the tent of meeting. He shall remove all its fat from it and turn it into smoke on the altar. He shall do with this bull just as it is done with the priest's bull of sin offering. He shall do the same with it. Thus the priest shall make expiation for them, and they shall be forgiven. He shall carry the bull outside the camp and burn it as he burnt the first bull. It is the sin offering of the congregation. In case it is a chieftain who incurs guilt by doing unwittingly any of the things which by the commandment of the Lord his God ought not to be done, and he realizes his guilt, or the sin of which he is guilty is brought to his knowledge, he shall bring as his offering a male goat without blemish. He shall lay his hand upon the goat's head, and it shall be slaughtered at the spot where the burnt offering is slaughtered before the Lord. It is a sin offering. The priest shall take with his finger some of the blood of the sin offering and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and the rest of its blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar of burnt offering. All its fat he shall turn into smoke on the altar, like the fat of the sacrifice of well-being. Thus the priest shall make expiation on his behalf for his sin, and he shall be forgiven. If any person from among the populace unwittingly incurs guilt by doing any of the things which by the Lord's commandment ought not to be done, he realizes his guilt, or the sin of which he is guilty is brought to his knowledge, he shall bring a female goat without blemish as his offering for the sin of which he is guilty. He shall lay his hand upon the head of the sin offering, and the sin offering shall be slaughtered at the place of the burnt offering. The priest shall take with his finger some of its blood and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and all the rest of its blood he shall pour out of the base of the altar. He shall remove all its fat, just as the fat is removed from the sacrifice of well-being, and the priest shall turn it into smoke on the altar for a pleasing odor to the Lord. Thus the priest shall make expiation for him, and he shall be forgiven. If the offering he brings as the offering he brings as a sin offering is a sheep, he shall bring a female without blemish. He shall lay his hand upon the head of the sin offering, and it shall be slaughtered as a sin offering at the spot where the burnt offering is slaughtered. The priest shall take with his finger some of the blood of the sin offering and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and all the rest of its blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar. And all its fat he shall remove, just as the fat of the sheep of the sacrifice of well-being is removed. And this the priest shall turn into smoke on the altar over the Lord's offering by fire. Thus the priest shall make expiation on his behalf for the sin of which he is guilty, and he shall be forgiven.
So, P-Town, quick question. Is there any part of this entire chapter that doesn't scream to you that this is clearly the work of idiot people, not necessary to a God? Is there any part that you think, hey, maybe a God would allow this, much less that God wrote this? Well, what is your impression here?
Well, I zoned out for a second, but I did read this earlier. Well, when I look at it, I'm trying to see some meaning in it, and maybe so. I mean, I know that infuriates you, but that's kind of my approach to
Are you
it.
gonna
Well, I don't see the point of trying to find meaning when there clearly isn't any.
Well, obviously,
So much
Leviticus
blood
isn't
magic.
written for non-believers. I mean, it's
Are you
How can you
saying that the
remain a
blood
believer,
magic is
though?
written for you?
I think it could be, yeah. I mean, I'm just touching upon it, but
So you think this is what the God who created every galaxy, this is what he wants. Is how to kill your sheep and waste the food, waste the life to waste the food, to make sure that you splatter blood all over everything. And this sounds to you like what God really wants in order to forgive somebody for some trivial cultural faux pas.
well, it sets the foundation of what was to come. We don't have to do
How?
this anymore because of Jesus.
What the
Of
fuck
course.
does
You
Jesus
know-
have to do
you
with
know
anything?
he's
No, 'cause there's that
missing-
whole thing. There's that whole thing in Hebrews about how Jesus' covenant supersedes the old covenant. So it's not like
Yeah.
So how
Jesus
could
is
there
a
have been a
demigod.
situation where the God of every galaxy, the God who created everything, ever required that we waste the life to waste the food, to turn the fat into smoke, in all of these specific instructions, in order that we could be forgiven for some stupid cultural faux pas that doesn't matter outside of that family?
Well, the thing with Jesus is he's a demigod. So the blood magic using his blood is far more powerful and can
But it
cover
wouldn't matter.
everything.
We're not talking about Jesus. We're talking about the Jews now.
No, P-Town is
About this
talking
other
about
town.
Jesus.
I know, but he's got to put himself back in the context of the people who wrote this story. They were not talking about Jesus.
No,
They
they
can't
were
be
not.
forgiven unless they follow all these ridiculous rituals that are not practiced anywhere in the world where the crime isn't even a crime.
But
How the
sacrifice.
fuck is any of this necessary to be forgiven for anything? Why? I thought God was supposed to have unconditional love, and these are the conditions of that unconditional love.
Well, in fairness, God hasn't done the whole unconditional love thing at this point. He's still, I will frickin' kill you if you bring me the wrong incense, you know?
A vengeful God.
Or if you make my incense anywhere else but for anyone other than me, because I am a jealous petty bitch.
That is a
Petty
direct
bitch.
translation. by
yeah,
the way.
jealous God. Yeah, he directly says he is. But-
That is direct, yes.
Yeah,
It's
I mean
just-
the whole.
There is
Go
a
ahead,
good
Will.
secular
There's
explanation.
distinctions
for all of
between
this.
I
the
was
There
just
isn't
going to
a
say,
religious.
if any god wrote this is a petty parochial little god of a little tribal people in a barbaric
Provincial
time.
God.
Yeah, a provincial god of a tiny little barbaric people in a barbaric time when the only things of value were sheep and shekels. It makes sense in that context. It makes no sense in the context of the God of 1,000 shining spheres in the heavens, who made all things and works all things for his glory. That makes no goddamn sense with this text. That God has nothing to do with this.
Well, the thing is, every single god concept in the ancient world included, or at least in this area, and
Yeah.
they included sacrifices and offerings. Like
And
that
blood
was just the nature of religion of the time.
Priests got
Uh,
eat.
yeah,
mean-
priests got to eat.
I
but
mean,
at
there
the
is
same time,
there
they
is
have,
like a
there's this always, for a very long time, there's this been an idea about, you want to please the god, and how do you please the god? And then a lot of people came to the conclusion, well, we should give him something. And how do you give him something? Well, you got to take something from this world and give it to them. So and that kind of very basic outline of sacrifices is in so many religions of the ancient world. And this is even even prehistoric speaking, the ones that we have the little evidence for. But yeah, it has, especially in ancient Mesopotamia, that was everywhere. So like they of course had their own version of it, but according to their
I'm
means.
sure they had slightly different ceremonial gestures and words and stuff. But I see, the thing is, and I think part of the reason for so many people's objection is that Christianity, especially, and some forms of Judaism, place their God as the all God, the overarching. All the others are these petty little silly human traditions, but ours is special. That's why you get so much pushback, because if you were just marking on the same level as Odin and Thor and Zeus and Zoroaster and all the other gajillions of them, you wouldn't get so much pushback, because just one of those, it's fine, it's no big deal. But if you
special.
No, it isn't, darling. You want it to be special because you believe in it. That's not the same thing. And this is one of those ways in which we see that the proposition of it being special is unsupported if it's based in this goddamn book.
Yeah.
Let's do this. Like, okay, here is what I don't mean to misrepresent your argument, so this is what I am hearing here. These 4 chapters about sacrifices mean something to Christianity because God replaces it later with the sacrifice of his own son.
Yeah.
That makes
Jesus
this
fulfills all of these.
Yeah, one
But
sacrifice to
but
end
all
all
of them have
sacrifices.
different meanings. Like we're in chapter 4, right? So this is the sin offering, and there's little subtle differences between that and the burnt offering. One, it's mandatory. The burnt offering is voluntary, I think. Also, the different places with, I think the smoke's different, and then where you put in the ashes there, and there's different subtle meanings to it. I'm looking forward to learning more about it.
Okay.
Hoping to find stuff. Yeah.
Let's fast forward then, even though we're in the Old Testament, and normally we don't do this because we talk, maybe not we, but you talk about Jesus a lot. But here, so if he replaces it with Jesus, this somehow makes more sense to you that a God would sacrifice his own son, and this would be a good thing to him to appease himself because he's mad at you. This is better than these silly rituals with the blood sacrifices in these chapters.
Well, I mean, as we kind of just established, this need for blood for sin pretty much around the whole world existed before Christ.
Why would any God need blood?
Why does God need
what
a
I'm
starship?
trying to say is this. So the concept of Christ before I became a Christian, it turned from the most ridiculous, stupid story that made no sense.
Yeah.
Right? The most awful thing, right? To once you realize that it's prophetic and it predicts the future, it demonstrates the future in advance through a book. So it becomes the most beautiful story that makes
it's beautiful to kill your
what
own
happens when you
son.
realize that it doesn't do any of that?
It is not beautiful. How many countless animals and children were slaughtered to prophetically show that God was going to do one more horrible murder?
Yeah, I'm gonna put down a fifth topic that P-Town and I need to talk about.
You guys should just stick together and talk about this all day.
I have a
prophecies that aren't really in the Bible.
I have a question for P-Town. Are you aware that Revelation 14:10 talks about Jesus enjoying the smoke and the scent of the people burning in hell? Might want to check that out.
I'll have to go look at that.
Yeah.
Long pork. Good stuff.
To be honest, there is like a what's the word, a spiritualist explanation for these sacrifices, and it's not that God needs the blood or that God needs the smoke or the scent or anything like that. It's more that sacrifice itself is the person giving it is giving up something that is value to them. So
it's the thought that counts.
Yeah, the act of sacrificing or trying to well for what you did bad or whatever, like that's that's the main thing, and all the meticulous details are just to make it
there are psalms that at least a couple of them that talk about how like the person lamenting is like, I know you don't really need like a sacrifice, or you don't really like revel in that stuff, which obviously contradicts this part where he is reveling it, he's pleasing to Yahweh and all that. So the concept has it changes over time, because while the means and the situation changes, people's theology will have to adapt to it. And there are hints of these things throughout the Bible because it was written over such a long period of time. You can track the transition.
A lot of
and
them.
then the whole notion about that you have to believe impossible nonsense for no good reason, and that if you do, then you get this posthumous promise, or an impossible promise of a posthumous reward, which is not something anybody should ever want. This would be something I would actively stay away from. But then the stick that opposes the carrot there is relentless, merciless, stupidly cruel, perpetual goddamn cruelty for having devoted your life to the wrong version of God.
And that's Christianity. But this was written by Jews. And
not at all beautiful.
The idea that basically making restitution, or returning yourself to the community, or in some way restoring when you break faith in some way, should cost you something, is not so absurd. But then it gets taken into this ridiculous extreme, and then everything has to be a metaphor for something, and then you end up with Christianity.
I just had to
so ridiculous.
I just had to comment because he said it was because P-Town said this was a beautiful story. Fuck nothing in it is remotely appealing at all. It's absolutely
jumping straight to the hell part, Arn, and consider this. Imagine if there were a God in your mind. Like, could you do that?
It would be a lot better than the one that's in the Bible.
Okay, so you're imagining there is a God now.
I'm imagining that there is a God, and if there was a God, it would be a lot better than the fictional one in the Bible.
I feel like we're diverging on this topic again. So
give me a second, Tyler, please.
I think we got enough.
Sure. Would you agree that there's sin in the world now that you believe in that there is a God in the hypothetical realm? So you you don't believe in good and bad.
No, I believe in good and bad. I don't believe in
hypothetical situation. The Bible says that God created good and bad, sin, evil, all comes from God. So why would he create it and punish you for it?
Morality doesn't come from the Christian concept of God. God doesn't care about morality. He cares about your gullibility. Evil Christians, no matter how evil they are, they can still get into heaven if they but believe. But it doesn't matter how good you are. If you're an atheist, you can't get into heaven. You're going to hell, period, forever. That's it, because you didn't believe. It doesn't matter if you were a good or bad person. Morality has nothing to do with this. God doesn't care about morality. God issues commands to perform horrible acts of evil. He doesn't give a fuck about that. It's, do you believe every bullshit thing the clergy tell you simply because they told you? That's the whole issue.
And when we get out of the law and into the histories, we will see that, at least in the Old Testament and the Jewish God, is more concerned with absolute slavish, absurd obedience. After all, he removes Saul as king because Saul doesn't kill everyone right away. He spares a few women and children. And also he spares a few animals to be sacrificed to God slightly later. So, he delays killing them by a day.
How dare.
I know. So the idea of sin being the same thing as morality is, it does not bear any scrutiny.
In Judaism, there is this thing, there's a difference between sins against, it says against people and against the place, which means God. And sins against people, you can't just bring an offering and you're forgiven. You actually have to ask forgiveness from the person you sinned against.
Which is
and
good.
It's only sins against, and then only sins against God you have to bring a sacrifice for instead. And the thing is, it's all about personal responsibility. So how can one person be sacrificed just because he's the Son of God, and that somehow forgives everyone's sins.
Exactly. And then forgiveness should be freely awarded with the only requirement that there's an acknowledgement of error and some attempt to atone for that. Right? That's the minimum for forgiveness. That you don't acknowledge your error, that you don't try to make you don't try to set it right, you don't try to make things better. You're just, all you have to do is kill a sheep in a particularly grisly way. The fuck? That doesn't make any sense.
Yes.
So I'm going to read some more comments before we close out of this. Zarnaran Carr says, Lilith, I know this book isn't great, but I mean, using two hands to drink the whole bottle of whatever that is, probably a little much. LOL. Where are my fermented drinks?
So much.
Drinking.
And then Zarnaran Carr follows up with on sacrifices being symbolic. Why couldn't God just ask for fruit or veggies, things that can't feel pain? I'm aware of the Cain and Abel story, but it doesn't explain why Abel's is better.
Because it was more of a sacrifice. It was more of a sacrifice. He gave away the best, the bits that he would have liked for himself.
So Daniel Quinn had some thoughts on that. He proposed that the Cain and Abel story was originally a piece of propaganda when the proto-Semites were starting to spread around the Fertile Crescent area, and there were other agriculturalists, the growers of the grain, and then the proto-Semites were pastoralists.
Said.
Yeah, yeah, and so the non-Semites. This was literally anti-Semitic propaganda. They spread this story saying that they want to do all the murder, whereas we think everything growing in the ground is fine. And then after the Semites eventually conquered the area, they tried to adapt the story into their own texts, their own mythologies, but it didn't quite fit because they didn't understand where it came from.
It was an Uno reverse that it was based on the old. And the when we were talking before the show about Song of Solomon, the ancient Sumerian text that I referenced about Inanna and her husband, that may have partially inspired that was also about your farmers versus your herdsmen, and herdsmen are better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then when we get to the kosher laws, it probably will have something to do with why pigs are forbidden as well.
Oh, that might have something to do with
city dwellers.
Truthful Serpent offers $5 and says, I about fell out of my chair laughing when he said that he kind of zones out. It's pretty telling when even a believer is bored to tears by the Bible.
Well, I read that chapter this morning. I think that's enough.
Yep. All right. Tomer, are we ready to close this up?
Yeah, I'm going to start. Okay, verse 2. Yep. What did you expect? You started it, not me. Verse 2. When anyone sins unintentionally, so Levine comments, the Hebrew verb shagag, to err, and its adverbial derivative bishgaga, unintentionally, were understood by the rabbis to have two related aspects. One, inadvertence with respect to the facts of law, and two, inadvertence with respect to the nature of the act. In the first situation, the offender might be unaware that the act was in violation of the law, or at the very least, might not know the specific penalties for such actions. In both the biblical and rabbinic traditions, it was conceded that ignorance of the law was a mitigating circumstance, and this was especially true in ritual or religious matters. Inadvertence with respect to the nature of the act itself would occur if, for example, a person ate forbidden fat, chelev, thinking it was merely ordinary fat, shuman, which is permitted. In both cases, the presumption is that an Israelite possessed of full awareness and knowledge would seek to obey God's laws, not violate them. Such unwitting offenses could therefore be expiated by ritual means. Verse 3, bringing guilt on the people. Levine comments, the errors and possible offenses of the chief cultic official, the individual in charge of the sanctuary and the priesthood, had an effect on the entire community. Here, the law refers to offenses occurring in the performance of the priestly office, not to the personal sins of the chief priest. And yet later commentators, such as Rashi and Rashbam, were not far from the mark in stressing that the chief priest's personal behavior was relevant to his sacerdotal office. In the Yom Kippur ritual set forth in chapter 16, we read that he had first to atone for his own sins and those of his family before he could secure atonement for the entire Israelite community. The sin offering, in Hebrew chatat, derived from the root chet tet aleph, which could either mean to sin if read as a kal stem, chata. It could also mean to purify if read as a pl stem, chite, as Adagon suggested. So this offering could be understood as purification offering. Verse 11, the intestines. More accurate will be its dung, in Hebrew pilsho, as the JPS suggests. Verse 12, Bamberger comments, usually the meat of the chata'at is consumed by the priests who perform the sacrifice in 619. But obviously the high priest should not eat of the sacrifice he brought for his own sin. So when the blood and fat has been offered, the rest of the carcass must be removed and burned so that it might not be misused or defiled. Verse 13, the whole Israelite community, in Hebrew, Kol Adat Yisrael. Milgrom comments, Edah is P's distinctive term for the entire Israelite nation, men, women, and children. In this usage, it occurs more than 100 times in the early narrative. For example, Exodus 16:1, Numbers 17:11, and law in Exodus 12:19, Exodus 12 verses 19 and 47, Numbers 153. It can also refer to all male adults, Numbers 14 verses 1 to 4, 31, 26, 31 verses 26, 28, and 43, especially those bearing arms in Judges 21. Finally, Edah can be used of tribal leaders meeting as an executive body in Exodus 12 verses 3 and 21 and Joshua 22 verses 14 to 16, acting on behalf of the entire community. The elders of the community.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I still note that the sin offering is the only one that explicitly requires a female, because even animal females get blamed for men's sin.
Verse 15, the elders of the community.
Well, to be fair,
they were shepherds.
Okay. Verse 15, the elders of the community. Levine comments, the elders, quote-unquote Hebrew skenim, represent a very ancient institution in biblical Israel, comparable to councils of elders known from other ancient Near Eastern societies. Several early biblical sources represent the skenim as part of the tribal system, in a role similar to the Bedouin or Arab sheikhs. The elders, quote-unquote, hark back to pre-urban and pre-monarchic periods of Israelite settlement in Canaan, but this institution continued to function during later periods as well and never fully lost its authority. Here, the elders act on behalf of the Israelite community in expiating collective offenses against God, as is often their responsibility.
So interestingly, on the elders of the community thing, this actually speaks to the uniqueness of Leviticus 4 in Leviticus 1 through 7. So the reference to the elders of the community is pretty uncommon in the P document, and it actually appears to be modeled on different expressions that are characteristic of the Deuteronomistic source. And here's a quote from Nihan. More generally, the representation of the elders of the community's lay leaders is not typical of P, where elders never play any significant political role. Their inclusion could well reflect the influence of the Deuteronomistic tradition, or it may be an attempt within priestly circles to acknowledge the role played by the Council of Elders during the Persian period. Likewise, the reference in Leviticus 4:22 evokes the so-called priestly passages in Numbers, especially Numbers 1 through 10. Let's see. Yeah. Also, the Israel's designation as the people of the land, which you mentioned, is no less singular in P. In the Torah, the reference is only found in two passages. In the Torah, the reference is only found in two passages of the Holiness Code. Moreover, the combined mention in the second part of Leviticus 4 recalls the Torah of Ezra 40 through 48, where we also find the same combination. If so, its unique use in Leviticus is likely to betray the influence of Ezra 40 through 48. Although this kind of analysis needs to be used with caution, close examination of the language of Leviticus 4 corroborates its distinct character. In particular, the fact that the chapter's terminology already includes many late traditions outside P, contrary to what is the case elsewhere in chapters 1 through 16, is consistent with the suggestion that it is a late insert.
Verse 22, a leader, in Hebrew, nasi, Paran comments, the chiefly institute is connected with the wandering period and the beginning of the settlement, and it's one of the foundations of the patriarchal society. The term Nasi is mentioned mostly in the pre-monarchical period. Afterwards, we don't hear of it as an institute, and it appears again in the books from the exile period onwards, like Ezekiel, Ezra, and Chronicles. It seems that its renewed use was of the nostalgic revival of an old institute with a change of essence. For in Ezekiel, the term Nasi is used for kings of the house of David, for example, 19:1, 37:25, and 45:9. The affiliation of the institute with a nomadic society is evident from its existence in the societies of nomadic tribes outside the nation of Israel. Ishmael in Genesis 25:16 and Midian, Numbers 25:18.
Wait, sorry.
Verse-
Were you saying that this was maybe I didn't hear the whole thing. Were you saying that this was indicative of nomadic tribes?
The affiliation of the institute with a nomadic society is evident from its existence in the societies of nomadic tribes.
Okay.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't say that any of this stuff is nomadic that we're reading through, or indicative of it.
No. Yeah. So it would be
Not
like the
directly,
chiefs
but
of the
the-
tribes, maybe more tribal than nomadic. Maybe. Yeah, the word is also reused later on in like the time of the Mishnah, I think, or before that, where it refers kind of to like the president of the Sanhedrin, the High Court. Although there was also the Av Bastin, which was the heads, and those two kind of people worked together as two separate jobs, and then it combined. And in modern Hebrew, the word means president.
Yes,
Nasi.
it is.
Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Verse 27, member of the community, in Hebrew, me'am ha'aretz, from the nation of the land. Ibn Ezra comments that this refers to all of Israel, the ordinary priests, and the Levites. Milgrom writes that the term denotes those who are neither king, officials, nor priests, according to Ezekiel 45:22, Jeremiah 1:18, Haggai 2:4, etc. He also writes, it also has a specific technical meaning, referring to a political group in the kingdom of Judah composed of loyal supporters of the Davidic dynasty. For example, in 2 Kings 11, 21:24, and 23:30.
Yep. And
Yeah.
in modern Judaism, an Am Haaretz, even though it literally means nation of the land or people of the land, is used for a singular person and means an idiot.
Oh, God. Well,
least-
there's better.
Which is funny because the word idiot also comes from the word meaning simple or normal.
Yeah, that's like in the later temple. I think this term is applicable for the late Second Temple.
It's
times.
interesting how the traditions left over from, nomadic herdsmen and the political motivations of preserving a Davidic or a Aaronic line, you can see them popping up in different places. And it's a pretty good indication of when certain elements were written. Obviously, we can be more certain about some things than others, but, it's...
Maybe it's more ignorant than idiot, but whatever.
I
A simple basic
can't
person that doesn't know what they're supposed to do.
I can't think of a better fate for a word originally denoting a cultist.
Oh yeah. I don't know if that was the original meaning, but it was used as you said. I never heard of that before.
Yeah. So I'm finished with my commentary.
All right then.
You
I have
commentary. Yay.
Yeah. I actually didn't think we'll get to that far, and so I have to prepare more.
What?
Yeah.
Tomer must regroup.
Commend everyone.
Tomer, before you prepare
And
more.
I've got a couple family matters I got to run off to, so it was a little awkward to extend this, but
Oh.
I appreciate the panel and don't want to cut into y'all's time.
I have
Yeah.
a question though.
So
These sin and guilt offerings, are they
Yeah.
still offered
done?
in
No.
Judaism today?
No. They're
No.
only
After the
applicable
temple
when
was
the temple
destroyed.
is established.
Yep. Temple's
After the
gone.
temple was
Sorry,
destroyed.
guys.
After the temple was destroyed, they established synagogues and prayer halls and stuff like that. So
Yes.
prayers rather than rather than sacrifices.
It's
Yeah,
almost
and I
as
will
if
also
the
quote-
religion changes as their social situation changes. Very interesting.
Yes.
I will also quote Bamberger on that, who says, "It was only with the rise of Reform Judaism at the end of the 18th century that believing Jews renounced the hope of restoring sacrifice. The Reformers said plainly that whatever pure purpose sacrifice may have served in ancient times, it is now obsolete and without meaning for the future. They therefore eliminated from the synagogue service the traditional prayers for the restitution." Oh, what? Can I please
Yeah,
finish?
there is.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm being cranky. I'm sorry. Restitution of temple and cult. Today, the conservative and reconstructionist movements have also explicitly renounced the hope of returning to the sacrificial system, and tacitly so have large masses of Jews not affiliated with these modernist movements. Arguably, even among some Orthodox Jews, allegiance to the cult may be chiefly verbal, consisting of reminiscence of a distant past and hopes for a vague and distant future.
You mean
There
it
is ideas
develops
that
like
we-
any other natural thing and
Yes.
changes over time?
Yes.
For the most Orthodox, it's like, well, God wanted it back then, and He wants to restore the temple. So we don't understand why He wants sacrifices, but if He wants to rebuild the temple and reinstitute the sacrifices, then we will do it with the joyful hearts.
This is something that I kind of don't get about Christianity or Judaism.
Mhm.
The need to instill this kind of fear in your followers that any step out of line and you're gonna need to sacrifice a bird. You know, it's a lot. I don't know.
I mean, it's a criminal law. It's like it's what the crimes are not the same, but it is a similar system of like, don't do it because you'll have to do something.
Way
Yeah,
too
but
much
some of the
Pick up
things-
strips on the weekend.
some of the things that-
This sin is
yeah.
super evil. They would have killed you back in the day, so now you know it's very important not to do it.
Yeah, like working on the weekend. I mean, like, is that really that big a deal that some poor bird or sheep or lamb has to die over it?
You have
If
to
you
grab it by
curse
the
your
legs and
father
wave it
and
over your
mother.
head for some reason. That
Okay, I'm gonna go pick up sticks now. We're on the Sabbath.
See, yeah, we're doing it right now. We're probably breaking some kind of law right now, blaspheming.
So
I'm gonna wait till Friday night.
one of
Oh,
you
this
is
Wednesday.
one of
Okay.
you is Tomer. I just checked the books. Arn only paid for 2 hours, so I shall bill you for the extra half an hour.
I'm afraid I do have to go as well. I have family dinner.
Yeah,
and I
no-
have to pick something up.
It's 3:30 a.m. for me, and I have a lot to do today, technically, so I need to sleep.
Okay.
He
Good
says
point.
after asking to extend the show.
Yes, because
Yep.
that's me, you know.
I relate, Tomer. Good on
We're
you,
trying to
man.
keep up the numbers of chapters per week we do. So
You did 4.
Excelsior. But
So
yeah, I can see how people would want to do the revisionist thing because not many people have goats and sheep anymore. It would cause a major economic instability to go back to that system.
yeah, you go to the temple, buy a sheep, and give it away. That's it.
Yep.
So you
Okay.
pay money.
Until
Yeah.
Jesus comes in and turns over the tables.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Peter,
That
before this goes
mischief
on,
maker.
take us out of here.
Yeah, he's a drama queen. We all
Goodbye,
know
everybody. See you on Saturday.
Bye-bye.
See you on Friday for Friday Apocryphal Podcast.